to be. You came in and rescued me, and now I'm living for you forevermore. I'm trying to figure out how your love is so deep. You still show favor on me after all those times I went astray. You never turned your back on me. Trying to figure out how your love is so free. You still provide the things I need, and even when I walked away, you showed your love and extended your grace. And I was living in a world doing God knows what I wasn't supposed to do, doing what I could to avoid the rules. Didn't know who I was so confused, didn't know what to do. But your love was watching over me from 100,000 feet away above the clouds. You call my name out loud. I'm trying to figure out how your love is so deep. You still show favor on me after all those times I went astray. You never turned your back on me. I'm trying to figure out how your love is so free. You still provide the things I need, and even when I walked away, you showed your love and extended your grace. Lord, you extended my faith, changed from my old ways, and all those times I didn't know which way to turn, nowhere to go. Guided me from up above, never giving up. In all those times I walked away, you always rescued me. I'm trying to figure out how your love is so deep. You still show favor on me after all those times I went astray. You never turned your back on me. I'm trying to figure out how your love is so free. You still provide the things I need, and even when I walked away, you showed your love and extended your grace. It's so amazing how you love me. I can't believe that you still love me.
I get more love than I receive. Look at my life and look at my dreams. Start on myself every time that I read. Boy, do I fit the prophecy. Boy, do I, boy, do I, boy, do I, boy, do I fit prophecy. Boy, do I, boy, do I, boy, do I fit prophecy. I swallow my pride and roll up my sleeves, giving my all till I deplete. Look at my life and what do I see? Boy, do I fit the prophecy. Boy, do I, boy, do I, boy, do I fit prophecy. Boy, do I, boy, do I, boy, do I fit prophecy.
The only nation that was lost as a whole, the only nation that was bought and was sold for the right amount of gold. We'll even sell our soul to tell us told from the Torah through Revelation. Read a chapter or more and do some meditation. That's the preparation before you prep the nation. Got the spirit of the law, don't need no legislation. If you coming out this year, I think you better wait in, cause we casting out demons and we rebuking Satan. Then back to basics, your shot adjacent. Take shots that they sent, then blow them all up. We a proverb and a byword is what they call us. Not just me, man, all us. The scholars and the ballers, the doctors and the lawyers, employees and employers. Tasha and LaToya, persecution means to harass and annoy you. I know you.
I get more love than I receive. Look at my life and look at my dreams. Start on myself every time that I read. Boy, do I fit the prophecy. Boy, do I, boy, do I, boy, do I, boy, do I fit prophecy. Boy, do I, boy, do I, boy, do I fit prophecy.
If not the coldest, sure the closest. Seeking wholeness, kingdom scoping, walk the walk before your retros told controllers. Scripts unfolding, must remain focused, enduring through the heavens in motion. Every chance I get, thought the end would come quick, man. Need grudges to maintain my soul on this campaign. Boots ready to move with that word of peace. Swore sharpened up before I hit the street. Truth is my belt is girded up for health. The vest to make us protect through his righteousness. The shield the size of mustard seed, but the Savior on my mind protect my dome piece. Stop and see this holy line that we trail it for property. And when I get to lapping all these squares, it's monopoly. I get bored with the game, unless I'm on my grind constantly, trying to fulfill prophecy.
I receive. Look at my life and look at my dreams. Start on myself every time that I read. Boy, do I fit the prophecy. Boy, do I fit prophecy.
Yeah.
Boy, do I
Come on.
fit prophecy.
How's this for prophecy? I know that works, tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich, and I know the blasphemy of them would say they are the Jews and are not the seed, but they the synagogue of Satan. That's why they be hating on the chosen generation. Just look at how we came in. Some of us was born here, the others came on slave ships. Started from the top, now we dying in the basement, digging and scraping for diamonds and treasure. Under pressure to dress just like our oppressors. It started making sense and then I made the connection. Now I read the scriptures like I'm looking at my reflection. Looking back at my life, the way that I treat my wife, the way that I raise my children, this was all prophesied. 10 toes down and I'm barely holding on. That's as Heidi is in the valley of the dry bone.
Mamleket Kohanim, Kingdom of Priests, Culture, and Heritage Preservation, to preserve, support, and promote the culture, history, and heritage of African every people scattered worldwide throughout the diaspora. Objective is to raise awareness and support to assist those who descend from the ancient African every groups, scattered throughout the globe with their desire to learn more about their history. The organization's efforts will be to connect with others of this heritage, scattered through the world through education, research, networking, media, and charitable efforts. Exodus chapter 19, verse 5 through 6, King James Version. Now therefore, if ye will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine, and there shall be unto me a kingdom of priests, Mamleket, Kohanim, and a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9 through 10. 9sb 95. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. For you once were not a people, but now you are the people of God. You had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Here are our customs. We turn towards Jerusalem when praying. 2 Chronicles chapter 6, verse 38 through 39 says, If they return to you with all their heart and with all their soul in the land of their captivity, where they have been taken captive, and pray toward their land, which you have given to their fathers, in the city which you have chosen, and toward the house which I have built for your name. Then hear from heaven, from the dwelling place, their prayer and supplications, and maintain their cause, and forgive your people who have sinned against you. We blow the shofar, or trumpet, every feast day and Shabbat. Numbers chapter 10, verse 2. Make yourself 2 trumpets of silver, of hammered work you shall make them, and you shall use them for summoning the congregation, and for having the camps set out. When both are blown, all the congregation shall gather themselves to you at the doorway of the tent of meeting. Here are some of the every Hebrew words we use. If you are interested in merchandise, please visit our website at https://mamleketkohaneim.org. Please read if you are interested in becoming a monthly member, giving a donation, or becoming a volunteer. Shabbat Shalom.
Things that he's doing in each and every one of our lives and our families' lives. Even as the world grows darker, it seems like his light is getting brighter. And, no weapon formed against us shall prosper. He has a plan for his people. And here we are on the set apart day that he has for us to recognize him as part of his covenant and how we're returning back to him by being obedient to his word as his children. So we give him praise, and we also praise Yah. And Shabbat Shalom for Mom and Miss Rosemary and Ak Nathan. Good to see you all. Thank you for joining. And Jashir for real, that's my son. Thank you for y'all joining. And Miss Vicky, thank you. It's always encouraging to see you as well. Shabbat Shalom. All right. And the scripture today will be coming out of Psalm 72. And it says, "Give the king your judgments, O Yah, and your righteousness to the king's son. May he judge your people with righteousness and your afflicted with justice. Let the mountains bring peace to the people, and the hills in righteousness. May he vindicate the afflicted of the people, save the children of the needy, and crush the oppressor. Let them fear you while the sun endures, and as long as the moon throughout all generations. May he come down like rain upon the mown grass, like showers that water the earth. In his days may the righteous flourish, and abundance of peace till the moon is no more. May he also rule from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the earth. Let the nomads of the desert bow before him, and his enemies lick the dust. Let the kings of Tarshish and of the islands bring presents, and the kings of Sheba and Seba offer gifts. And let all kings bow down before him, and all nations serve him. For he will deliver the needy when he cries for help, the afflicted also, and him who has no helper. He will have compassion on the poor and needy, and the lives of the needy he will save. He will rescue their lives from oppression and violence, and their blood will be precious in his sight. So may he live, and may the gold of Sheba be given to him, and let them pray for him continually, and let them bless him all day long. May there be abundance of grain in the earth on top of the mountains, and its fruits will wave like the cedars of Lebanon. And may those from the city flourish like vegetation of the earth. May his name endure forever. May his name increase as long as the sun shines, and let men bless themselves by him. Let all nations call him blessed. Blessed be Yahuwah, the El of Israel, who alone works wonders, and blessed be his glorious name forever. And may the whole earth be filled with his glory. Amen and amen. The prayers of David, the son of Jesse, are ended. Hallelujah. Let me blow the shofar. Let us pray. Dear Yah, we just thank you. We just thank you for the goodness that you have given unto us, the love that you have shown us. We can feel your presence near us. We can see it even in our lives when we don't deserve it. We still trust in you. We have faith in you that your word is true and that your promises are true for your children Israel to be redeemed in the time of distress, to be forgiven in the time even when our sins are just so much that from generation to generation you still love us and you still want us to be redeemed, to come back like the prodigal son, to come back into your arms with love, even though we have been so wicked of a people, even in our individual sins and the sins of all the generations that have passed. You still are there, and we ask you to be with us as part of this service, as we give you honor, glory, and praise, as we recognize you by keeping this Sabbath day, and as a creator of heaven and earth, creator of all things, and we trust in your word even as we move forward in life. We know that it's a light unto our path, a lamp unto our path, and a light unto our feet. We just trust you that you're going to continue to lead us and guide us and help us to do what's right in your sight. We ask you to convict our hearts. We thank you for the Ruach HaKodesh, and ask you to convict our hearts for things when we walk astray from you, in times that we don't reflect you in our lives, in our personal lives. Help us to get back in line with you if we have fallen astray. And thank you for the time that you held back, the time of the end, and it's just for us to get our lives together. And we thank you for your son, Yahushua HaMashiach, who died for our sins and who's coming back to redeem us as well. We love you and ask you to be with us the rest of the service as we give you glory, honor, and praise. In Yahushua's name we do pray. Hallelujah. Amen. Amen. We'll have a song from Maisha.
While I'm down here praying, yeah, I search my heart. While I'm down here praying, yeah, I search my heart. While I'm down here praying, yeah, I search my heart. 'Cause you know, yeah, whether I'm right. And you know, yeah, whether I'm wrong. And you know, yeah, whether I'm right or wrong. Whether I'm right or wrong. While I'm down here praying, yeah, I search my heart. While I'm down here praying, yeah, I search my heart. While I'm down here praying, yeah, I search my heart. 'Cause you know, yeah, whether I'm right. And you know, yeah, whether I'm wrong. And you know, yeah, whether I'm right or wrong. Whether I'm right or wrong. Search me, ah. Search me, ah. Search me, ah. Search me, ah. 'Cause you know, yeah, whether I'm right. And you know, yeah, whether I'm wrong. And you know, yeah, whether I'm right or wrong. Whether I'm right or wrong.
Thank y'all for giving us that time of worship as well. And Shabbat Shalom, Cousin Atkinson. Shabbat Shalom to you as well. So these are some of the one of the videos put out last night It was late last night. As you know, time is just getting a part of me with all the stuff that's going on. So sorry for the delay there, but just wanted to get this out because it connects to the other videos as well, and somewhat to what we're going to be talking about today also. When it talks about the leadership of Yah versus what man tries to do as well, right? We have a lot of good people in our midst, and some of the things, people have great intentions, but we have to be careful to make sure that we keep Yah in the proper perspective, in the proper place, and stay in our proper place as well. So in this video, we talk a lot about how the community from the last week, remember these are all old videos too, so these are from like a year plus old. So, you know, how they basically considered him, start calling him to be the Messiah. And they talk about that, and then even some of the people actually start saying that they had, like, you know, could live forever and stuff like that. But you can also see the same in so many different communities, and people don't realize some of the history and some of the doctrines of so many other black movements, like I think I talk about Nation of Islam, how they looked at Farad Muhammad as the Messiah, and then or the Mahdi in, you know, the Muslim belief. Then talk about what's my man's name, Bob Marley and Rastafarians, and you know, how he believes that Haile Selassie was the Messiah. And then there was another one, can't think of the other one, but there's what, and then even them thinking about, you know, that he was the Messiah as well. But there's so many even fringe beliefs in Christianity, and even in Christianity, you know, there's just wide open now, so many different strange doctrines and belief systems and things of that nature. I think talk about how they had first gentlemen, right? A lot of differences in opinion with homosexuality entering in. A lot of the Christian church now is accepted. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff that men decide to put as standards instead of what Yah wants as standards. So we'll be talking about that today, going through some of the kings as well. So next slide. So this is also connected to this, right? So this is one from last week when we talk about the village and how they get there and how they try to establish it, you know, as being Yah's people, trying to go back to the land, and they make an attempt to do so. And they had challenges and stuff, but, you know, kind of makes you think about how Yah is going to do it the second time, as we know that there's a second Exodus and that there's another ingathering that Yah is going to have for his people. And we'll talk a little bit about that today as well. And then next. And then, you know, we talked about the difference between the black Jews and how even in America that there are some black Jews that decided to convert to Judaism. And that's why, you know, very important reason why I showed this, because in the video to put out last night, he shows that they didn't want to convert even though they went to Israel. And because they won't convert, they had to deal with a lot of issues trying to be accepted, even though that's before the some of the laws were put in place for the year of the laws of return or something, where you have to be showed that you're maternally descendant. And we talked about that in the last couple of weeks ago. But, you know, they changed the law during that time to say, you know, you had to be a maternal descendant of a Jewish convert, I guess, to be accepted. So that's why I showed all the stuff about maternal. So a lot of these videos that we've been showing on the live, like today, and the videos that we showed in the past, I try to tie them all together. So that's the reason why you have to kind of, it's like stepping stones. So, you know, I'm more worried about you getting those who want to understanding, because some people just want, you know, entertainment. But there are some people that are really trying to understand and not get caught up in a lot of these movements, because Yah wants to be king over us, and that's what we'll be talking about today. All right, so next slide. All right, so here we have the Ibri Heritage Fact. And this is one of those that I'm going to show from before. It's one of the older videos, a long time ago, but it's important because Benaya Israel, next slide, he's going to here's the fair use. But he's going to tie a lot of those things together, right? So it's important to, understand some of the archaeology and some of the things. It's 100 proof. And I really think that this is one of the best videos that he has, really, that connects a lot with the archaeology and stuff. I mean, he has a lot of great videos when he first started, especially when he connects a lot of the history and talk about who we are as Israel. I know he's kind of talking a lot about the modern day events now, but some of the older videos, he really talks about a lot of the history and the connections and stuff. And I'm like, wow, that really opened my eyes to a lot when I was trying to understand a lot about our connection. So I'm gonna show this, and it's going to connect us also to modern day people. And then we'll talk a little bit more about how you can connect through your DNA and ancestry. So, this is why we show these, so you can connect back through your own DNA and family lineage to some of these places to prove who we are. And I learned something, so I learned a lot as part of this process. I knew some of the stuff, but, I'm going back and looking back at it. I found some other stuff just this morning. So a lot of times I'm getting together the videos and the lessons in the morning. Sometimes I want to do more, but that's why I thank y'all for allowing me to do this, because it challenged me and it makes me search deeper for this information and how we connect, and hopefully it's helpful for you too. All right, so Nick, we'll play the video, and we're going to start it from a certain point here just because of the sake of time. But as I always say, go back and look at the video, the full video, right? It's so important to look at the full video because we have limited time. And then, whenever I repost the videos on Friday, I try to add more to it because, there's a lot of gaps to some people's knowledge. But, you won't see this probably until another 6 months or so, that when I try to edit all that. So go look at the full videos when we show this type of stuff, just so you can get your knowledge and, make sure the proper persons get credit. I've been seeing in the comments, people act like I created some of these videos. I didn't create these videos. These are other people's videos, and this is the reason why I put this out there, so you can find it and go back and search it. And like I said, the disclaimer says, we don't always agree with everything on some of these videos, and sometimes people put out other stuff on their page. Like I tell people, I'm not as responsible if you go out in all the other videos and get some of the doctrines and stuff like that. That's on your own. But I try to show this because it has some very important relevancy to what we're discussing. All right, so we'll play this now.
Reading old books about the Jews. And no, he's not black, Hebrew, Israelite. However, he sees a shocking truth hidden in plain sight. The truth that the old books describe the Jews as black. In his book, The Image of the Black in Jewish Culture by Professor Abraham Mahlman, a professor at the Department of Jewish History and Thought at the University of Haifa in Israel. In his book, he writes, and I quote, "A strong European tradition dating back to the Middle Ages maintained that Jews were black, or at least swarthy, and find sharp expression in modern anti-Semitic literature. You see, old books describe the Hebrews as black. This is not something made up by black people in America in the 1800s or the 1900s. Now, in his book, History in Black, African Americans in Search of an Ancient Past by Professor Yaakov Shavit, a professor of the history of the Jewish people at Tel Aviv University. And in his book, he writes, and I quote, "In medieval literature, a theory prevailed in which the Jews were part of the black race, or were at least dark-skinned. As you can see, the idea that the Brews were black dates back at least to medieval times and persisted into the 19th century. Professor Tudor Parfit at the Department of Religious Studies at Florida International University, in his book, Black Jews in Africa and the Americas, he writes, and I quote, "The idea that the Jews were black persisted into the 19th century." And he goes on to say, 19th century physical anthropologists in general assumed that Jews had a close.
All right, so we can see there that, even in the background, in history, a lot of these historians talk about how the Israelites were even black then, right? So this is not just something that's a Black Power movement and some of the changes that actually goes on and what people think, this is actually very important that we show how this is not our thoughts, right? Because that's how they try to label us, right? If you look at what I put out yesterday, they try to, even talks about how they try to broad brush everybody just because of what was done in Dimona and some of the history and some of the stuff that actually happened behind the scenes. And they try to, say that all Hebrew Israelites are part of some cult or something, right? And they do the same thing here in America, right? They'll take certain, extreme groups that's, kind of have some strange doctrines, and they try to apply it to everybody who believes that way. So now, even in, probably in some of you all in your families and stuff, right? As soon as you hear say something, I'm an Israelite, they automatically think, oh, you're in a cult, without even understanding none of the history, none of it, right? And they want to go ahead and say that you're in a cult. But when, professors at these universities or historians or a lot of the people who actually anthropologists and stuff, they know all this stuff, and they're getting books and they're getting money for all this stuff. But with us, right, we get, oh no, you're in a cult, right? So it just shows you how our mindset as a people need to change, right? Like Yah has to change our mindset and our understanding so we won't always just dismiss everything our own people say, because sometimes, as we showed in one of the other videos, we don't know what the agenda is around some of these people, right? They'll come and say, oh, you're the Israelites, oh yeah, convert to Judaism. Like, we don't even understand what that means, and we'll just do it just because the person, makes us feel good about ourselves, and oh, I want to be accepted, there's benefits and stuff, right? So we have to be very careful to make sure that we understand of who we are, and don't always feel like we have to be justified. Now that we know, right, that we always don't feel like we have to be place a stamp on us to say, oh, we're looking for other people's approval. But we know when we're first waking up, a lot, even me, right, we're looking for some kind of assertion or some justification outside of our community. But the fact that they're speaking outside of our community, within within the early black church, Christian church, like I said, a lot of them used to say we were Israelites way back, at CME, AME, one of those videos I put out, right, to try to build those building blocks so you get an understanding of how we got here. And then once we, are solidified and truly understand who we are, now there's no, shaking of our doubt within us. And then it was about how we're going to move forward in it. So just want to put that out. And Shabbat Shalom, Arlen Terrell, 1036. Brother Shazak. I'm not familiar with him, so no, it's not associated with them, but I'll be interested to hear. I'm always open to all our people through all the different walks of life and beliefs, and know who we are, or so yeah, I guess I'll put it in the comments on not the live, because I'll lose it, but put it in the comments about who he is and website, and I'll go check it out. All right, thank you.
Racial, that is blood connection with blacks. You see, in general, it was a common understanding during medieval times that the Brews were black. And maybe you're wondering, if it was commonly understood during medieval times that the Brus were black, then why are they considered white today? Why is it anti-Semitic to call them what they once were? Well, to answer that question, we need to take a trip to Yisrael. The land of Yisrael, home to Christianity and home to Islam. The homeland of the Brus. We'll begin our march to 100 proofs on the streets of Jerusalem. Here we can find rabbis as they walk along the cobbled streets of the capital city. We follow this rabbi to our first proof, the language of Yisrael, called Hebrew, which is a Semitic language, also called an Afro-Asiatic language. Semitic Afro-Asiatic languages can be found in North and Central Africa. Hence the name Afro-Asiatic. The prefix Afro in Afro-Asiatic is short for African. We also note that the language of the Brus was formerly called Hemito-Semitic or Semito-Hamitic. The language of the Brus is an African and Asiatic language. Our next proof can be found in Egypt. You see, Egypt is where the children of Israel served as slaves. And today, in the Brickmeyer tomb, we can find depictions.
So that's important to actually know, right? That Hebrew is an Afro-Asiatic language, right? It's African and Asian. So that just lets you know there's something about that language that connects Africans and Asians together, right? A Shemitic people with a Hamitic people. And sometimes we need to not even look at African as just Africa as just a pure Hamitic nation. There were Shemitic people actually in Africa. We even talk about the the Beta Israel Ethiopian Jews, right? So we know that there's definitely Shemitic people that was in Africa, and even the name Africa, if you know about Josephus, he says that's because of a descendant of Abraham, Epher, right? So that's Shemitic, married with Keturah. And then in Middle East, what we call today Middle East, we know that there were Cush, right? Nimrod. Nimrod was the one who started Iraq. That's Uruk in the Bible, Iraq. It was a black man, right? Cush means black. Nimrod was a black man, and he started that nation. So there was a lot of mixture of Chaldees. There's a lot of that was mixed. So just don't have your mindset to say Africa is all Ham and, anything east of Africa is all Asian. No, there was a lot. Remember, Ham, Shem, and Japheth got off the same boat in Turkey. Right, when Noah's Ark, descended, all three of the people got off the boat in Turkey, and they mixed and migrated to the different places. So we can't allow all, you know, a lot of those things that were taught to us based on racism, you know, even DNA. We got to be careful with DNA because DNA tries to say, I think we talked about this before, that, you know, that African Americans or African people are West Africans are E1B1A, and then Middle Easterns are E1B1B, and J1, and, you know, and then Europeans are R1 and stuff like that. And if you start looking at some of that stuff, like R1 could be also connected to some of my cousins, Sudanese, right? It can be connected to the Egyptian kings, right? Pharaohs. So, and then how, when you talk about J, right, J1 and E1B1, they say, oh, that's the Israelites. How's that? How can that be? How can one male, right? Males get the Y chromosome passed down to them. How can one male have two different Y chromosomes? It can't be J1 and E1, right? It has to be. So, and then E1B1A, right? Like you say that the people in the Middle East has E1B1B, right? And then African Americans and West Africans have E1B1A, and then act like they're so many generations apart when there's just one character difference, right? And then even says that the Israelites will be scattered away from Israel based on biblical prophecy. So how can you still have that DNA and say that those are the Israelites? Have to be somebody who had DNA that's been scattered, right? So it just shows you that Noah, when he got off the boat, he couldn't have all these different DNAs because Ham, Shem, and Japheth was his sons. They should have the exact same Y chromosome that he had. So once again, you know, we have to make sure that we use DNA for what it's for, right? The gathering, grouping of people. But from a biblical sense, they said it takes thousands of years before there's a change in the DNA from one letter to the other letter and to all that. And, you know, Noah and his sons was one generation. So how do you get all these different? So, you know, it's important to understand that, you know, the migration's based on the biblical sense and what that means. So even when we go into some of these other understandings, it's important to understand, you know, that, you know, we still all come from the same person, right? Noah, all nations come from Noah, right? We all are, you can say generations to generations back, we all family. You know, we all are humans, right? There's no difference in who we are. Nobody's just popped out of the sea. I know we have a lot of those false doctrines about how people try to say the serpent seed of Cain, and you just read through the Bible and that's just debunked just by reading the Bible, because it talks about whose children were, right? So there's not like Eve had intercourse with a snake and had Cain and all that kind of stuff. So the serpent seed are really those hearts that are not aligned with Yah, right? Especially with Yahusha. So there's some, we have to make sure we look at things biblically when we come to that. All right, so let's keep on going.
Of Semitic people, toiling while making bricks. With loins girded, these dark-skinned Semites are pictured in the various stages of brick making. Now, notice how the color of some of the dark Semites has worn off. However, if you look closely, you can still find the dark complexion of an African people. The third proof is also found in Egypt. It involves research performed by Dr. Samuel George Morton. The racist Dr. Morton analyzed nearly 600 skulls related to Egypt. In his book, Observations on Egypt Ethnography, he notes that the skeletal remains of the Negro can be found in many places in Egypt, and that they built the pyramids. And the following reference reads, and it reads, I have been enabled to make extensive and satisfactory comparisons by means of nearly 600 human crania, which form a part of my private anatomical collection. And the next page reads, and it reads, the true Negro conformation requires no comment, but it is necessary to observe that a practiced eye readily detects a few heads with decidedly mixed characters, in which those of the Negro predominate. For these, I propose the name of Negroid crania. We proceed in the next place to analyze these crania individually, arranging them for the purpose of convenience into 7 series according to their sepulchral localities. From the Memphite necropolis, Pyramid of 5 Steps, Saqqara generally, front of the brick pyramid of Dosher, northwest of the Pyramid of 5 Steps, Tura on the Nile. Second series from the grottos of Mabdet. Third series from Abydos. Fourth series from the catacombs of Thebes. Fifth series from Kum Ombos. Sixth series from the island of Beguer near Phila. Seventh series from Bedob in Nubia. Now, these are just some of the locations of the Negro skulls in Egypt. Dr. Morton's analysis of nearly 600 Egyptian skulls not only confirmed the presence of Negroes in Egypt, it also helped confirm who built the pyramids. As the following reference reads, and it reads, we have the most unequivocal evidence, historical and monumental, that slavery was among the earliest of social institutions of Egypt, and that it was imposed on all conquered nations, white as well as black. So numerous was this unfortunate class of persons that it was the boast of Egyptian kings recorded by Diodorus that the vast structures of Luxor and Karnak were erected by the labor of foreigners alone. Of Negro slavery in particular, the paintings and the sculptures give abundant illustration. The land of Egypt, the land of captivity, where the bones of the Negroes can be found scattered throughout the land. During the time of the pharaohs, and based on the manner in which they were buried, we know that they served in Egypt as slaves. And who was it that served as slaves in Egypt? That's right, family. It was Yisrael. So now, on to our fifth proof. And for our fifth proof, we will return to the land of Yisrael. And we visit Judah's royal city of Lachish, where in 701 BC, King Sennacherib led his massive army against Judah's fortified city of Lachish. After King Sennacherib conquered the city of Lachish, a stone monument was made to commemorate the defeat of this city of Judah. And on this stone relief, we find depictions of what occurred on that fateful day. We can see Assyrians taking loot from the royal city, carrying away various artifacts for reward. We also find detailed depictions of the chosen, set-apart people of Judah. And when we look close, we find the face of the Negro. The city of Lachish also contained a mass gravesite in which excavators recovered roughly 695 skulls. This leads us to our sixth proof, the skulls of Judah in the royal city. As the following reference reads, and it reads, the very first report on the Lachish skulls included a thorough examination of pathology, metrics, artificial deformation, and epigenetic affinity. Utilizing craniometrics, Risden in 1939 concluded that the group was very similar to dynastic Egyptian material. In fact, he stated that the entire population was of foreign origin, representing descendants of a group derived primarily from Upper Egypt. This conclusion was subsequently supported by a craniometric study by Musgrave and Evans in 1981. Keita in 1988 likewise examined the skulls metrically, omitting those that were either artificially deformed, female, warped, split, or juvenile, using only those measurements that he believed were consistent population discriminators. He concluded that the group was fairly heterogeneous, having close relationships to North African, Egyptian, and Nubian groups, thus lending support to the Egypto-Nubian presence.
So you can see how he's connecting a lot of this to the siege of Lachish. So we talked a little bit about that some of the previous weeks, about how some of the kings actually established, I think it was Rehoboam, established that city. And we can see now, even in archaeology in the British Museum, that those things are there, right? So that's just the amazing piece too, right? Like all these things are how he's connecting them from the past, and he's going to continue to connect it even into our future. So, well, future from here, I should say, some of our more recent past, I should say. So it's very important for us to understand, you know, a lot of people talk about the head, our heads, you know, especially within our own community, we talk about our heads and shape, long head and all that kind of stuff. So all that has a connection even to burial sites. And the question is, you know, why, if they have these skulls and stuff, have they ever did DNA analysis? Have they ever done any excavations or, you know, made any connections to modern day people? But from my understanding, at least, a lot of these things are not being allowed to, you know, being able to extract some of the DNA from some of these sites. Some of them have been done. I heard, you know, that's how you saw last week how my DNA connects back to some of the places in Judea. I think it was Bethlehem and some of the other places. So there are some that did, but, you know, some of them have still not been done at all, because even in Israel, it's illegal to have a DNA test for some of the citizens there. So that without a court order and stuff. So we can see how a lot of those things are being held up, and why are they being held up if it's should be easy to do? Hey, just do the DNA test and there we go. But they hesitate on doing that. All right, so he's going to now connect it to other places, right, that has very similar. So this is real important to a lot of stuff that we talked about, Spain and Portugal, where the slave trade started. All that stuff is he's getting ready to bring together now. All right.
Researchers go on to suggest that these Nubians weren't Egyptian foreigners at all. They suggested that they were native to the region. Our next proof involves the Judean city, Masada. Attacked by Rome after 70 AD. And after sacking the city of Jerusalem, Rome advanced to Masada. And as they advanced, some Druze decided to take their own lives instead of dying by the hands of the Romans. Excavations at Masada revealed the remains of the people of Judah. For example, located on the lower terrace in the northern palace of Masada, archaeologists discovered the remains of 3 bodies close together. As the following reference reads, and it reads, one of the bodies, Yadin said, was that of a man of about 20, perhaps one of the commanders of Masada. Next to him were armor scales, dozens of arrows, an inscribed potsherd, and fragments of a prayer shawl. Nearby on a plaster floor stained with what looked like blood was the skeleton of a young woman. Her hair was still preserved, beautifully plaited or braided as if it had just been freshly coifed. Her sandals also were preserved next to her body. The third body, Yadin said, was that of a child. The woman's hair didn't just consist of braids. It included the scalp, which contained locks, which is characteristic of the Negro hair. As the following reference reads, and it reads, this hair was subsequently taken to the Forensic Science Division of the Israel National Police for analysis. Skipping ahead, the forensic analysis revealed the braid plaits of the hair had been severed by a sharp instrument. Further, the length of the hair and the curvature formed by the proximal ends of the plaits indicates that they were severed close to the scalp. The cut ends of some tresses exhibited a step-like pattern. The random pattern of the cut locks and the steps are consistent with erratic movement of the head in relation to the cutting instrument. In other words, the head was probably in motion while the hair was being sheared. What could account for the presence in the northern palace of an entire head of hair shorn from a woman? In addition to the braids and the locks found at Masada, the skeletons found at the site matched skeletons found at the Hever Valley site. And the Hever Valley site was said to contain.
So Masada is basically during 70 AD when the temple was destroyed, the Israelites ran to the other fortresses to protect themselves. And the Romans came in and they, they basically tried to get rid of them, right? They went to multiple sites, and Masada was the last place, and it was supposed to be, very hard to penetrate. But I say Romans, they knew what they were doing. They were doing all kind of stuff. They kept on pushing dirt, and it was like it was on a hill, and they kept on throwing dirt over and over until they got a place high enough to take over it. But they would get like some of the slaves and some of the other people to actually do it. As the arrows are coming down, killing the slaves, they just kept on sending them over, because basically you're killing your own people, right? As they take over one place, they're using them to fight the other places. But when at least the tradition is, when the Romans got into the city, finally breached it, that they had already killed themselves. Like they basically committed suicide. And so, you know, that's why with some of the archaeology and some of the stuff that's actually found there, you'll see some of the connections there. So this is after 70 AD, right? So he's making that connection all the way through, all the way up to the point of connecting back to us, all right?
Skeletons of the Bruise. As the following reference reads, and it reads, the skeleton type is identical with that discovered in the caves of the Hever Valley. And it continues and it reads, the archaeological findings led to the conclusion that these skeletons, as well as the skeletons found by Ahura-Nay in 1954 in the Nahal Hever Cave, and probably those found by Ahura-Nay and Yadin in later expeditions to the Judean desert, are all remains of Jewish refugees from the War of Bar Kokhba against the Romans. The land of Israel was divided among each of the 12 tribes, with the tribe of Judah settling the land to the south. It is within the territory of the tribe of Judah we find the city of Lachish, which means the bruise depicted in the Lachish relief are specifically the tribe of Judah. It is the tribe of Judah that's depicted as a Negro in the Lachish relief in roughly 701 BC. Not only that, roughly 104 years later, we then have another major event, the fall of Jerusalem to the king of Babylon, who takes the people of Judah, sends them to Babylon and to Spain. As the following reference reads, and it reads, the Spanish Jews maintained that they had been transported hither after the destruction of the temple by the Babylonian conqueror Nebuchadnezzar. Certain Jewish families, the Ibn Dawids and the Abarbanels, boasted descent from the royal house of David, and maintained that their ancestors had been settled since the time immemorial, partly in the district of Lucena and partly in the environs of Toledo and Seville. The numerous Spanish Jewish family of Nasi also traced back its pedigree to King David. So family, knowing that the tribe of Judah, shown in the Lachish relief as a Negro, was sent to Spain roughly 104 years later, then what should we expect the bruise of Spain to look like? Answer: we should expect the bruise of Spain to look like the bruise shown on the Lachish relief. We should expect the bruise of Spain and Portugal to look like Negroes. As the following reference reads, and it reads, the Spanish Jew is always dark complexion. And the next reference reads, and it reads, in his habit and manners, very formal, a tall, thin, very black man, like a Spaniard or Jew, about 50 years old. We note the skulls excavated in Lachish were skulls of black people, and the skulls of the bruise in Spain were also skulls of black people. They were dolichocephalic. And the following reference reads, and it reads, the Negroid type is primarily represented by the Negro of Africa, between the Sahara and the Cape District, including Madagascar. The skin varies from dark brown to brown black, with eyes of similar dark hue, and hair usually black and always crisp or woolly. The skull is narrow, dolichocephalic. And the next reference reads, and it reads, of the other skulls investigated, it appears that most of those derived from Sephardim, or Spanish and Portuguese Jews, are dolichocephalic. And the next reference reads, and it reads, the same variability occurs in other finds, but the skulls of most of the Sephardim, or Spanish and Portuguese Jews, are dolichocephalic. So if you ever wondered, why are the Brus of Spain and Portugal black? It's because they were shown as black people in the Lakesh relief. Again, the Lakesh relief shows Brus of Spain roughly 104 years before they were sent to Spain. All right, well, let's review. We began by reviewing the language of the Brus, and we learned that the Semitic language was an Afro-Asiatic language, or an African-Asiatic language. We then took a close-up look at the Hebrew slaves painted on the walls in Egypt, and we learned that they were a dark-skinned people. And we also learned that the skulls of the Brus could be found throughout Egypt in many locations during the time of the pharaohs. And we also learned that after identifying the Negro in Egypt, they were identified as some of the builders of the pyramids. We next took a look at the Lakesh relief, which contained a detailed description of the Brus. We then reviewed the skulls of Lakesh, which also identified the skulls of an African people, identified as Egypto-Nubian. We also reviewed Masada archaeological findings to discover the hair of an African people. And finally, we identified the connection between the Brus in Lakesh and the royal Brus of Spain and Portugal. Well, family, hopefully you've learned a lot. And Most High Yah willing, we will shift our focus to the Brus of Spain and Portugal in the next episode of 100 Proof. And as always, thank you to those that continue to lift me and my family up in your thoughts and prayers. And thank you to those that continue to support these lessons for allowing the Most High Yah to use you to help awaken the children of Israel around the world. And thank you to those that continue to share these videos with family and friends. Well, family, if you enjoyed the video.
All right, so hopefully you can see how he connected all that together, even down to Spain and Portugal as well, and why that's so important for us, because we know that the slave trade started in Seville, Spain, right? So that's important for us to actually to know. And Shabbat Shalom, P, and yeah, and Arlen Trail. Yeah, here we don't, we know that Yah's people is all people, so we're not a racist group here. So rather even when I thought Jesus was a white man, I just wanted to be saved. Now that I know that he's a descendant of Israel, and that we are too, it just makes, we're now the Jew, not the Gentile, right? And there's prophecy that actually goes, but he actually grafted, other people as well, right? Gentiles he grafted in as well, but he said, don't forget their natural branch. So, even some of the people that we actually know, just because people are black skin color, not everybody's even black are Israelites, but yet there's still a way for all people to receive him through Yahusha. So just want to make sure that's clear as well. It's about getting salvation, and that's our number one goal, is to push Yah's light and salvation through all the earth to anyone that will receive it. And, to also know that prophecy is coming through his children, raising up Israel for a sign unto the nations to repent. So that's also some of those promises, but it says not all Israel are Israelites, right, as well. So we also are mindful of that too. It's about the heart, that Yah wants to be circumcised more than anything else. All right, so Isaiah 56, a prayer, house of prayer for all nations, and that he said he will even bring Gentiles in just from a different way. But he said those who keep his Shabbat, his Sabbath, and love to keep do his will, his covenant, his commands, then there's a place for them as well as the eunuch, and that's a verse in the Tanakh or Old Testament. So we definitely preach that as well. All right, is there a link to B'nai Israel's video? My wife might can put it in there, so you can have that link if you want to go directly to it also. All right, so we've been having some problems with our slides today, so I don't know what versions of slides and stuff. We're having some issues here. So next slide. All right, so this is what I was talking about. This is from one of my old slides when I used to speak in different places. But we can see on the left side that this is coming from, let me try to get to it here so I can see it better. This is coming from the Virginia Encyclopedia. And it basically talks about how Seville, Spain was where the slave trade actually started, and the agreements and stuff there in Seville. So he just said that's where on the right side is what he talked about. Actually, I think that's actually from one of his PDFs. But it talks about how the descendants of King David during the time of Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar, how they actually took some of the Israelite families and took them to Toledo and Seville with when the first temple was destroyed. And then even after the second temple at the bottom, they did it again. They took some of the same families to Seville after the second temple too, to Spain. So there was a lot of Israelites from descendant of Judah, King David, going to Spain and Portugal, and by name. So we can see those names too, right? So we talked about that before around the different names. And then in the next slide, that this is actually a book, Carolina Genesis. I showed this a lot, but it actually connects back to certain families that had this heritage, right? And it says Carolina, so we're here in North Carolina, but it's South Carolina as well. But it shows this Adam Ivy. So if you know some people in North Carolina by the last name Ivy, it says that Adam Ivy's parents were Thomas Ivy, who claimed to be Portuguese, and Elizabeth, a free white woman. So when you hear a lot of historians talk about North Carolina, they try to say that black people used to say that they were Portuguese in order to avoid slavery, escape slavery. But a lot of these people and they try to say in some cases the white mother was Portuguese, and they just basically identified with the white mother. But we can see here that this family had Thomas A. Ivy, who claimed to be Portuguese, marrying a white woman, a free white woman, right? So let's read a little bit about that. Next slide. It says that in the book, this is the book, another book talking about the same family, I believe, if I remember correctly. I just pulled slides from some of the old stuff, but I'm pretty sure it's the same family. It talks about how in the 1619, 20 Africans, and it says he belonged to the Spanish race of people. I am positive that it was either Spanish or Portuguese. So he was practically trying to justify his inheritance, and the people that was around him had to basically confirm, right, that he was what he says he was. He wasn't somebody who was enslaved. He was actually somebody who was Portuguese. So it says, I am positive that he was either Spanish or Portuguese. I was a tax collector in the district at one time, and among other things, I was required to levy a per capita tax on all Negroes, and I recollect distinctly that it was not levied by me upon him. He, Bolton, was a dark-skinned man with a very, very straight hair and long nose. So thin vestige man. So, this is what he was describing. I think Bolton was a descendant, but this goes back to Ivy somehow. But basically talked about how they looked, right? Very dark skinned man, straight hair, and a long nose. And you can see that even among some of our people. And this is actually in the Carolinas, or going to eventually be connected to the Carolinas. It says at the time referred to when I was tax collector, some parties reported to me that Bolton was of mixed blood. Thereupon, I proceeded to investigate the matter by calling in 3 citizens living in his neighborhood, among whom were a Mr. Young, Mr. Miles, and others to assist me in deciding the questions. The decision was in favor of Bolton to the effect that he had no Negro blood in him. So just trying to say he's not a Negro, but he's black and he's a Portuguese. Dark. So that why would they even have this discussion and this debate if he's basically trying to talk about how he was a Portuguese and not African Negro, right? Like, what's this all about, right? He had to look like somebody who was basically from Africa, an African descent, for him to even be in court or wherever this is, making a claim that he's not, right? Then it says, Therefore, I proceeded to investigate the matter by calling in 3 citizens living in his neighborhood. Among were Mr. Young, Mr. Miles, and others assisted me deciding the question. Decision was in favor of Bolton to the effect that he had no Negro blood in him. About the same time, my attention was also called in the official capacity to a Mr. Dempsey, who claimed to be a Portuguese, and that the decision in his case was that he was of mixed blood, but I gave him the right of appeal, but he left the country. Bolton and Dempsey were not in any way connected. The lawyer, in his argument that Martha Bolton was not of African descent, and said that she was a Malungan. Years later, the lawyer, now Judge Lewis Shepard, explained this in his memoirs. These people belong to a peculiar race which settled in East Tennessee. So I talked to somebody yesterday. Oh yeah. One of my ox was talking about East Tennessee and West Tennessee. I was talking to him last night. At an early day, known as Malungans, a colony of the Revolutionary War, and settled on the coast of South Carolina. So from South Carolina, they made their way up to Tennessee. Didn't have planes, and probably along the way, they were, having other families just stop in better places without going all the way there. And it says they multiplied rapidly, and by this industry and energy, they accumulated considerable, next slide, property. The South Carolina people, however, would not receive them on the terms of equality. They refused to recognize them specially, and would not allow the children to go to school with them. I had never heard of the word Malungas until one day, years ago, inside of a local genealogy library, when one of the library's organizers mentioned that I should investigate if I might be Malungan. I thanked him for the suggestion, but it went over my head. Being that I was involved in research over leads about family history at the time, I never investigated his suggestion. Now I want to learn more. So, that's why I say I sometimes even give people a lot of information, because until you hear the word first time, how do you know, to even research the word, right? So you got to be exposed to the information. Is repetition that gets you to remember it. So this is when it talks about Ivy. It says, what would I find out about Micaiah Ivy's ancestors? Micaiah Ivy, named after his father's brother, was born around 1805 in Marlboro District, South Carolina. He was the son of Isaiah Ivy, who brought the family first into Mississippi. So these people are going everywhere. South Carolina to Mississippi, and then finally into Texas. Isaiah Ivy was the son of James Ivy and Mourning Driggers of Marlboro District. James and Mourning Ivy had 6 sons, James, Curtis, all these different people. The father, James Ivy, was born sometime in 1740s. He died in Marlboro County, South Carolina in 1820, and left a will bequeathing his last effects and 9 slaves. What is said next is particularly important in helping to identify him among the courts between 1769 and 1772. James Ivy was residing in Bladen County, North Carolina. So we can see there, he's here in North Carolina as well. So, if you see some of those Ivy families, so that's what was referring to earlier when we were talking about Adam Ivy, right? These different connections of these people who claim to be Portuguese, and some of them were actually considered to be of dark skin or mixed descent, even though they might not be connected to, African, as they say, African Negroes, right? So next slide. So I think I showed this before. So even my DNA connects me back to Grenada at close 18%. So this is something from 1550, but it shows that, somehow my DNA is connected to the Moors, or at least the people that lived there. But even when you read there in the red, it talks about genetic DNA also indicates strong ancestral lineage from the Eastern Mediterranean or the Levant. Levant is basically the Middle East, which could have made its way to Iberia, either independently or through North African population. So it connects us to North Africa. That's where like the Moors went, the Israelites went. That's how they made it to Spain when they were basically getting taken there too. All right, so next we can see, we talked about this before, how did my DNA also, or, Lumbee DNA connects down to, if you look at the bottom, Moroccan, Ethiopian. It says Lumbee tribe, Mozabite, Yemen, Ethiopian Jew, Egyptian, Puerto Rican, right? So this is the Lumbee connection back to the Moors. You can see that the Lumbee connects to the Moors, right? And a lot of people, talk about the Lumbee saying that they're the black, in the bad way, the N-word, Native Americans and all kind of stuff, and they just got federal recognition. Now everybody wants to be a Lumbee, right? Like before they were like, oh no, I don't want to be no Lumbee, and now everybody was like, oh, Lumbee, you get federal money, right? It's like the Cherokee. So but there is a mixture. It's not that the Native Americans went to, it's that the people that came over here mixed in with the Native Americans and made who they are today, right? So it was a lot of times the Sephardic or the Portuguese Jews, when they were running out of Spain and Portugal because of the persecution, they will come to America or to South America or to the Caribbeans, and they'll mix in with the Tainos, right? The black Native Americans of the Caribbeans, or the Arawaks, the ones that Christopher Columbus first came across. And then there's some, like the oldest Native American in all Americas was found, the bones were found, it was a black, like Australian, right? So we can know that our image of what Native American is all messed up, right? There's no way only one DNA came to America with all those generations, and you can show you it was a mix, right? So like if you just talk about like the Northeast Asians that migrated, people say, over the ice bridge and became the Inuits. People don't know Eskimo is a derogatory word. They call it Inuits. And then they came over here to America. They were usually like light skinned, right? Almost looking white, like Russians, Chinese, Asian. So when we talk about like the Washington Redskins, why do we show that as a dark red Indian back in the day for their emblems and stuff? Showing you there's something that was going on, right? So next is talking about the UNC. I showed this, I think at our Shabbat service. It says DNA evidence of Croatans and Sephardic Jewish settlements of North Carolina coast dating from the mid to late 1500s. And it basically connects them to the Lumbee Native Americans. So it says, while the British origins of North American colonization currently are widely accepted, there is new evidence that other countries and non-Christians may have been early in establishing permanent settlements of North Atlantic coast using new research tools of human genomics. This paper provides DNA evidence that Croatans and Sephardic Jews were absorbed into the ancestral population of the Lumbee Native American tribe of North Carolina during to the mid to late 1500s. We further propose that these Sephardic Jews originated in part from a subgroup of the Roanoke colonists of 1586. Given this, a new historical narrative of early European colonization in North America during the 1500s is proposed. So you can see the Croatans and the Lumbee. So like even my family were in that area. I think it's Cherry Point or something. A lot of my family were, some say were connected to the Croatans. But you can see, next slide, it's interesting because this is my DNA. And if you look on the left side, right, you can see Lumbee in my DNA, right? And then Puerto Rican as well, right? At least a connection to those people groups around the world. So it's important because the next slide there, it's kind of hard to see up here, but the Bladen County there is down towards, you can see where it's crumbling. I don't know if you can see where it says Raleigh. That's where we're living now in this area, Wake County, if you're not from here. And if you go right below that, that's Harnett County. And then below that is Cumberland County. And then below that in pink, that's Bladen County. And that's important because, wherever your family is from, it's important because, the connecting counties are Robeson, Sampson, and then you can see, even like Duplin, Pender County, you start getting towards those, and New Hanover. So that's basically, New Hanover is basically where a lot of the people came in on boats, right, here to North Carolina back in the day. If you look to the right, you can see that line. If you're not from North Carolina, you can see those line of islands all the way to the right. That's called the Outer Banks. And a lot of boats couldn't make it through the Outer Banks. So that's why we didn't have a lot of direct slaves come to North Carolina. They either were imported through South Carolina or Virginia or taken through New Hanover, Wilmington, County. And so that's what actually starts the Gullah Geechee people as well. So when they came into that area, right, how do you migrate through, you go through Bladen County. You can see Moore County up there, kind of over there towards the Yellow, Lee. You can see all that, Robeson. You can see that's where they're talking about that some of these people were living in Moore County that were Portuguese all the way through that area. You have a lot of people. The Lumbee are from Robeson County, as we said. And the next slide, this is actually talking about the Malungans, so I'm not going to read all these people, but these are the mixed people they say of Angolan, of European, Angolan, Native American, and Portuguese descent. So now they try to widen it to other stuff, but usually it's those three groups that you have in your DNA, you're considered somehow to be connected to the Malungans. So, who are these people? They actually were treated wrong, and they were actually treated in a bad way as well, and they end up going to the Tennessee mountains and stuff, North Carolina, Tennessee mountains. North Carolina and Tennessee used to be one state at one time, and Tennessee broke away from it. But even South Carolina, North Carolina, all was one big state. So we can see how these people migrated across, and now they're a whole different, section of people, but they couldn't, had different rights for schools. They had to kind of, like some of the Native Americans, kind of try to blend in with certain people. And then next slide. So this is I'm just going through this real quick. So some of this stuff, just trying to put it together with the video. So my DNA also, you can see in on the right side, the DNA before the transatlantic slave trade. It was in Africa, West Africa. I didn't show this part because this is talking about Spain and Portugal. But you can see where it says Spain, this is before the transatlantic slave trade. My DNA connects to archaeology digs in Spain before the slave trade, right? And then even in the Middle East before the slave trade. So why is my DNA popping up in these areas if E1B1A is only in West Africa, right? But we know that Yahya Negro is important to understand. Yahya Negro, he talks a lot about that, B'nai Israel. And he basically was a descendant of King David that's been documented. He was very important person. He ran Moors out fighting against with Portugal against some of the Moors that was living there. And then he was given a town that's called the Eidos Negros, or the Village of the Blacks, and that's what he was over in that area. And the other one. So a lot of times they try to say he got the name from being over, but there's reference to there's actually no reference to that directly where they can actually say that from a historical standpoint. But then at least that I don't know, that I couldn't find. And then, even here, sometimes they'll call different people Negro because they were black. El Negro, black, right? The black. So that reference was done a lot longer before the other story that came up later on. So next. So this is important because this is Yahya Negro. If on Family Search, you can basically search and find family connections, right? So they try to put up the genealogy to see if you can actually connect to there. And you can see here, Yahya's Negro's descendants, and you can see that his wife, one of them, David, this is one of his sons, I believe. But you can see that the wife there is named Navarro, right? So that's one of the names that Benea mentioned as part of the video. Navarro, I believe that's one of the names. But next, it's Nassi or something. But we can see Navarro here is actually in the Jewish Virtual Library. And it basically talks about how he was an important person, personal physician to King Pedro, and his chief tax collector, served for nearly 30 years as chief Rabbi Arabi Moore of Portugal. So why does it put that exclamation point and say Arabi Moore? I put the yellow thing there. But why does it say that? But he was basically considered a Jew, and he was one of the main people. So what does that word mean, that Arabi Moore? So next slide. So it says the term Arabi Moore, this is just AI. It says a historical title for the chief rabbi of Portugal during the Middle Ages, right? So we just said that early. But if you go down, right, it's basically two words meaning rabbi and Moor, as in, the people who were living in North Africa. that actually, talks about the Berbers. And we talked about before how the Berbers were considered to be, in South Carolina laws, the Negroes, right? The only people who can be enslaved. They said was the North Africans, the Moors. It says the North Africans, the Berbers. So they call, African Americans in South Carolina, at least, North Africans, Berbers, and said that's the reason we could be enslaved as the different types of African, right? So that puts a connection there too about, that these people were considered to be rabbis that was descended from King David, and they considered to be North African Berbers or Moors, right? So all that's connected. And let me see, next one, just for the sake of time, we'll go to, and this is one of my cousin's DNA. And you can see that he comes from, one of his lineages is Paulino Navarro. And I had to translate this from Portuguese to English, so that's sorry about the formatting there. But it talks about how his descendants, and then you can see where it says, the last one, talking about his children. And it says, as indicated on page 26 of the marriage book for whites and pardos, covering the period of 1797 to 1848. So I was like, wait a minute, what is a pardos? That's one word that did not translate as part of this. And then I have family members, some connection to Rodriguez, and he's a Navarro, this cousin. Perez, I don't know if this is the side of his family I'm connected to, but me and him talk, because I just took, like I say, take these names and just put them in Ancestry like we taught in the workshop, and you'll see them pop up, right? Like your family connections. Anybody who has a family connection, then see how you're connected to them to see if that goes back to Spain and Portugal and some of these descendants. But next slide, the Pardos refers to individuals of mixed ancestry, particularly in Latin America. In Spanish America, Pardos were the children of formerly enslaved black people who gained freedom and held significant roles in society, including military and political positions. So that's in Spanish America. So, the fact that the Navarro family was considered Pardos, what did that, showing that there was some blackness to them being descended even from Yaya Negro and King David. But you can see in Venezuela, it says the term describes people of mixed African, European, indigenous. That's the same thing Moluccans are, right? African, European, indigenous, Native Americans ancestry, right? Historically marginalized and kept in servitude. In Brazil, Pardo refers to individuals with predominantly European ancestry, highlighting the complex racial dynamic in the country. And European doesn't always just mean white European, right? So even Yaya Negro and those Navarro families, can still be considered European, because remember in the earlier claim of the Ivy family, they say they were not African Negroes, right? So what would they consider them? Portuguese, Europeans, right? Even though they're black, right? Black Portuguese. All right, so next, you can also see a picture, that's on the left and the right of the Pardo officer on the right. You can see how they look, right? It's just like regular black people, at least here in America. Mixed, most African Americans, you have what makes us African American is that we have African blood predominantly, right? Some kind of E1B1A and all that, right? Along with European blood, usually around 8 to 20%. And then you also have the Native American, like 2%, 1%, something Native American. So that's what really makes us African American also. But so that's why I tell people, they get all caught up and say, oh, we Native Americans, oh, we're Africans. We all, I'm like, we have a very rich, we're the most diverse people, they say, in the world is African Americans. Africans are, number one of the most diverse people in all these different continents. And then on top of that, we got additional stuff placed within us through the slave trade, right? Deuteronomy 28. And you can see the different colors, when it talks about there Pardo and related terminology in a Venn diagram. You can see the Pardos in the mix. You got all that other stuff, African, indigenous, and European mixed in together. And that's important because it actually talks about Pardos and Caribbean and Northern South America. It says most Pardos with Caribbean and North South American historical inhabited the territories where the Spanish conquistadors imported slaves during colonial times, such as, all these different places, Cuba, Saint Domingo, Puerto Rico. I said Puerto Rico was on my DNA. Venezuela, the Narvado, my cousin, his Navarro family comes from Venezuela. That's where they were at the time. That's where he finds his roots before he searches it from Venezuela back to Spain and Portugal. So Ecuador, Colombia, and it says Pardos were the children formerly enslaved blacks. Same thing. People who are now free black people in Spanish America. These Pardos were able to join military and had moved up in high political and military roles such as generals, congressmen, and senators. Pardos also helped win the fight for Latin American independence by fighting on the patriot side of the cause. In Pardos and Peru, so that's important. In Peru, Pardos are referred to mixture of Spanish and indigenous American with a little African contribution, located exclusively along the coast in greater proportions between the regions of Tubas to Ica. All right, so next, remember I showed y'all this, right? My DNA and how one day it was considered to be like in the Peru, Mesoamerican Indies. It said Peru in some places, and then all overnight it switched to Spain and Portugal. So it shows you how those people were connected. Once again, those Pardos were connected to Spain and Portugal, and they were also considered to be connected to Peru and some of those South American countries. All right. So next. So that's just why it's important to, to hear some of these things out, and why it's important to do your own lineage. Because, like I never knew African American DNA was connected to South America when it comes to Peru and some of the indigenous people there. My DNA saying I'm connected to some of the Incas and some of the way back people. And I'm like, how? I don't understand that, right? So we just can't have that closed mind when people just say, you're just this one type of people, right? Even in like Africans, I think I said this before, but when some people volunteer and allow us to, use their DNA to do some of the comparisons, and that they match with some of the ancient South American, Native American bones. I said it came from Australia, Aborigines from Australia that were black. They connect to that closer than I do. The ancient Native Americans, more than I do. Now I have Native American heritage. They say they have no Native American. They don't know anything about no Native American heritage, but they have connections to the ancient Native Americans of South America. So it just shows you there was something going on that more than they trying to tell us. There's no one DNA of any country in the world, unless you're talking about when Ham, Shem, and Japheth first got off the boat. That might be. But after that, people integrated, they mixed, they migrated, right? So anytime you see on the thing that says, oh, this is one DNA, like that's the algorithm that each DNA, testing company does. And that's why it's different among different testing companies, because they're might be looking at a different period of time or different people. Because you got to ask, how did they get the DNA to start with? If they didn't pull it from some archaeology dig, right? They took somebody and said, what are you? Okay, you are Portuguese. I'm just take your DNA. Now everybody, right, is considered. Now they probably go to some of the older families and traditions, but even those were replacement people, right, of many different nations that migrated and won over and took over the land and mixed in with some of the people. So you got to also understand that part also. So hopefully that was helpful to show you some of those connections, because as we talk about, Black Portuguese and stuff, hopefully now your mind is opening up to a point to say, hey, that makes sense now, right? That we were called Negroes, a Portuguese word, and not just black, right? What the English should have called us, they spoke English, they should have said you're black. But they said, no, they call us Negroes. They call us a Spanish and Portuguese word, since Spain and Portugal were some of the main people who were in control during that time. All right. So we're going to get into some of the lesson now.
You got a question.
Oh, what's the question? I don't see it.
It says, Shabbat Shalom, I'm Gullah, found out I have some ancestry to the GA people from Accra, Ghana. Also, does this congregation do Torah portions? Also, first, my name is Spanish. I'm kind of suspecting that has something to do with the Spanish Inquisition. But do you do Torah portions?
I explain a little bit more what you mean by Torah portions. We're going to go through we do a biblical overview of the Bible and connect that to who we are today, and we, do a lot of different subjects, teachings, and stuff. But give us a little bit of understanding what you mean by Torah portions. But the Gullah Geechee are, very diverse people. The Gad people are connected to the Gad, so that's not even talking about the Spanish and Portuguese piece. That's just straight migration, where we'll talk about in connection to some of the history that we're going through, not today, probably next week, y'all willing. But all what we're talking about today is also connected to that, because the northern tribe was, they were got taken out to captivity in Assyria, and then they were released, and a lot of them, went to Africa. So that's why you get the migrations of many of the African tribes, the Gad, the Gadagmi, Gad and Dan, the Dan tribe, the Yakoba tribe, Jacob, and they mix with the Kisi people of Ivory Coast, who are connected to the Da tribe, the Yakoba, and you just go to this here video, even Jewish Israelis are going down there and talking to them and saying that about their culture. But the Kisi people are where the Geechee name is connected to, Kisi and the Geechee. So, how the southern Gullah Geechee, the ones mostly in the north are Gullah, the ones at least in the south, from what I was told, are Geechee, like Florida areas, but they were called that, connected to the Kisi people. So that shows you there's a connection there also. So we're a very diverse people, the Gullah Geechee. The Gullah word means mixing bowl, right, in Hebrew, or it means kindred. So, the fact that they mixed all the different languages together with all the different tribes to come up with the Gullah Geechee dialect and language, it just shows you that we have a lot of different connections to many different tribal people, as well as people within Spain and Portugal, even, like I said, European side of us, and even like, some of the Native Americans that came before Columbus, they were black. Some of them were black too. So we'll get into that lesson later also. So hopefully that is helpful. But your first name, we got all kind of first names, so it's kind of hard to say from just the first name unless there's a family tradition of that name being passed through your family. Like one of the names of my family is Calvin. It means bald. But a lot of people in my family, my father, brother, my uncle, my great uncle, great grandfather, a lot of them had that name that passed through the family. So if you have, especially like a Hebrew name, like Emmanuel, Elijah, like on my father's mother's side, they have a lot of those names, James, Emmanuel, Moses. That shows that there might be a connection if they, did that over multiple decades, right, of different people. So we got a lot of that on that side of the family, and that's the side of the family that connects to Senegal, and that's where some of the black Jews live, right? That's the Portuguese side, I believe, of our DNA comes from there. So, that's good that you're trying to make those connections, but, look at also if you got some Spanish DNA, if it doesn't show that, it doesn't mean you don't have it, right? So DNA is not the ultimate end to everything. So don't, some people misjudge DNA and say, oh, my DNA is not there, I'm not that. No, that's not right, right? Your great-great-great-great-grandma, you only get like a certain percentage of DNA passed down from one generation to the next. So like some of my first cousins, me and them hardly share any DNA together. It won't even pop up on Ancestry, but I'm connected to their father, and of course they're connected, who's my uncle, and they're connected to their father. So don't just say, if the DNA is not there, you're not that. But look at the family lineages, right? Like your great-great-grandma, and try to connect those, right, to that history as well. That's probably even more important than DNA. DNA just helps us as people being taken through the slave trade, because, find out lineages, you might hit a roadblock because, they didn't give slaves' name, they didn't document the slaves sometimes, so you might not get that connection, but the DNA will help you jump over that. So get your siblings' DNA if they'll allow you to, get your uncle, your aunt's, DNA, because that will basically show you more of a total picture of your family's DNA.
They usually say, like, if you have 3 people, 3 siblings together might make up your total, close to your total mom's and dad's DNA. So like 3 siblings. So, that's shows you how much DNA you might not get that might, draw a connection there also. All right. Hopefully that helped. All right. And Shabbat Shalom to you, Messianic Jew, as well. All right. So let's get some down to the lesson. So hopefully the lesson will show up right here because, like I said, some of the slides are messed up. So it's about the kings. We're talking about the kings, right? So it's just like we talked about with the people who said that they were the messiahs, or people claimed that they were the messiahs, right? It seems like people always want that charismatic leader, right? They want somebody to represent them. And Yah has forever wanted to be king over us as his people, but we keep on putting other people between us and him, even ourselves, between us and him, right? We always want a representative and want to be. So Moses, way back when, since we're talking about kings, I thought this would be important. In Deuteronomy 17, Moses was a prophet. I don't know why I hear a lot of Christians now, whenever we talk about Deuteronomy 28, they'd be like, oh, Deuteronomy is not a book of prophecy. But he had so much prophecy in there, right? That even Paul is quoting in Romans and other places too, right? The Song of Moses is talked about even in the Brit Hadashah New Testament. So in Deuteronomy 17 and verse 14, it says, when you enter the land which Yahuwah your El gives you, and you possess it and live in it, you will say, I will set a king over me like all the nations who are around me. Everybody wants to be like everybody else, right? So we can see that even in our own lives, right? Everybody wants to, our children to grow up to be the best basketball star or the singer, right? Rapper or whatever else. We want our children to be popular, to fit along with all the other nations, to basically show that they were successful, right? And sometimes those things, have to deal with a lot of pain, a lot of spiritual problems, but we don't want to say, hey, I want my child to be saved and sanctified and doing right, knowing who they are as Israel, right? We don't say that. We want to be like the other people, right? Like those things, we try to make exceptions. That's what they did. Even we'll talk about that during the time of Hanukkah, is when the Olympic Games came in, right? A lot of those Levites who were supposed to be, watching over the temple, the young ones, went to go be part of the Greek games to be trained and all, right? So it's like Yah wants us to, not just as our children, but even us, ourselves, he wants us to be dedicated to him. And then he wants to be, that will show his dedication even to us. But it says in verse 15, you shall surely set a king over you. He's already saying, now they're in the desert with Moses, hadn't even made it to the promised land. And he's saying, verse 15, you shall surely set a king over you, whom Yahuwah your El chooses. One from among your countrymen you shall set as king over yourselves. You may not put a foreigner over yourself who is not your countryman. Verse 16, moreover, well, also think about this, right? If you can think of a king that was put over Israel who was not Israelite, put it in the chat, right? As I go through this, hopefully I'll see some replies. But in verse 16, it says, moreover, he shall not multiply horses for himself, shall not, right, have many horses, nor shall he cause the people to return to Egypt to multiply horses. Since Yahuwah has said to you, you should never again return that way. He shall not multiply wives for himself, or else his heart will turn away, nor shall he greatly increase silver and gold for himself. So we know we got a problem. When you're talking about Solomon and stuff, all the wives, and a lot of people end up saying, oh, the kings had, multiple wives. It's okay to be a polygamist. It's like, wait a minute. They weren't supposed to have multiple wives. It says this even before they got to the promised land, that they shall not multiply wives for themselves. All right. And then verse 18, we know about silver and gold, right? Even Solomon was the richest king ever, person ever. So we know that they had a lot of gold and silver. So 18, now it shall come about when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, he shall write for himself a copy of this law on a scroll in the presence of the Levitical priest. It shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear Yahuwah his El by carefully observing all the words of this law and these statutes. So we know, we'll get to it later, but in the time of Josiah, they found the Torah, right? They found the book of Yah. Like, how did they lose it? If the king was supposed to write this stuff and read it every day of all his life, like, how did they lose it? It just shows you that, if we don't keep Yah's word written on our heart and before us, we can easily stray away as well. So, that's why I always say it's good to read Yah's word, at least listen to it daily, because it's supposed to keep us maintained, to fight, keep our minds in the right place when we're getting tempted in certain ways we're not supposed to, or challenged, right? So we can stay in line with Yah. So the king was supposed to do that. So in verse 20, it says that his heart may not be lifted up above his countrymen, right? So he didn't supposed to look at himself as higher than anybody else. But we know many of the stories, when we talk about Ahab and stuff like that and trying to take other people's land and all that stuff, we know that that was not true. And it says, and that he may not turn aside from the commandment to the right or the left, so that he and his sons may continue long in his kingdom in the midst of Israel. So this is for prophecy before they even made it to the promised land, before they even had, before they even had a king, right? Abimelech was the first king of Israel. He wasn't the first official king, but we can see how they were already doing what Yah told them not to do with Abimelech when they said allow him to be the king over the people, right? And he was self-appointed. Killed all his brothers and was self-appointed to get him to be king over the people, even before King Saul was even anointed by Yah to be the king. All right, so next. So here in 1 Samuel, we can see in verse 8, so now chapter 8 is that then when they make it to the land, right, now they're there, and it says in verse 1, and it came about when Samuel was old that he appointed his sons judge over Israel. Now the name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second Abijah. They were judging in Beersheba. And his sons, however, did not walk in his ways, but turned aside after dishonest gain and took bribes and perverted justice. So we can see that even holy people that's doing right, your children might still, they all have a decision. Everyone has a decision to do what they want on their own, right? Even us, right? We might have holy parents that was trying to do us right, and it might have been called in Christianity or something, but they were trying to do us right based upon their knowledge and understanding, and yet we still went astray and decided to do whatever we wanted to do, right? So, it's not always a reflection of the parents as the child, but sometimes it is, right? Like if you're not trying to get your children to understand scriptures and keep them, that's why I say assembly is important, right? For people to come together and congregate together, to raise their children, the next generation with at least like-minded other children. So when they get to a point, they'll have somebody there for them, right? And then even for us, even with the things that we do, we want in time of our needs and time of issues, we want somebody to walk with us, right? When we die, we want somebody, to be there for our spouses to funeralize them, right? Or times our children get married, we want somebody from our same belief system to actually marry our children, right? But yet there's this thing, I at least feel, that, we're not really committed to the things of Yah, just like, the people of Israel wanted to do everything else but the things that Yah was calling them to do. But in verse 4, it says, and all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. And they said to him, behold, you have grown old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Do now appoint a king for us to judge us like all the nations. So we know Samuel was a judge, right? He was one of the judges, and he was also connected to the priests, and you can say in a way he was also a prophet, right? He was prophesying, telling stuff of future stuff. So he was the one that was bringing them out as they were coming out of the desert, wilderness into Israel, and now trying to be established. He was the one that was carrying them through that transition period. And now they're basically saying, hey, you're, the next person that's appointed, we don't want him because they're not doing right. So, even in your life, always try to connect it to who we are as a people. But in your life, what kind of representative are you of Yah when you're trying to reach out to your family and you're not living the life, right? Like, how can we get on other people saying, hey, you know, you're doing those pagan feast day, holidays, right? And then you're supposed to be doing feast days, and then we're not even doing feast days, right? We're not committed to the things of Yah, to the Shabbats and stuff that he's called us to do. And even we might be having attitudes and fighting and cursing and drinking, and, you know, then we try and tell, oh, you're not a holy nation. Like, how does that work, right? So Yah, in the same way, he's holding us accountable, just like he was holding accountable the sons of Samuel. But yet Yah still had his way of doing stuff. And now they're seeking the ways of the other nations in order to justify, hey, they're not living right, even though I'm not living right, but they're not living right. We want a king, and who's the king going to be? Somebody else is not living right, right? So it's like, hey, we need to do things the way that Yah has and not try to define our own ways. And that's what I was saying in a video last night when they were trying to establish their own government, their own priesthood, their own lineage. And we can see how a lot of those things actually happen even in the Bible. But in verse 6 it says, but the things was displeasing in the sight of Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed to Yahuwah. And Yahuwah said to Samuel, listen to the voice of the people in regard to all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them. So that's what Yah wants to be. He's our king. He's the creator of all things, right? So they're not just rejecting, he said Samuel, right, and his sons, they're rejecting the process, right, that Yah has instituted from the very beginning. He knows what he's doing. He knows that his sons were going to be wicked, and he'd probably kill them and bring somebody else. So maybe their hearts might have turned later on, but they were falling outside of what Yah had established and seeking their own way. So how many times do we seek our own way, right? Instead of following the things of Yah, we try to go and do things on our own or our own methods based upon what everybody else is doing in the world. So we see in verse 8, it says, like all the deeds which they have done since the day that I brought them up from Egypt, even to this day, in that they have forsaken me and served other Elohims, so they are doing to you also. Now listen to their voice. However, you shall solemnly warn them and tell them of the procedure of the king who will reign over them. So Samuel spoke all the words of Yahuwah to the people who are asking him of a king. So he told them, right? So even Moses told them that what was going to happen before this even occurred. And even afterwards, they still want to have a king. They're rejecting Yah for their own way. So next slide. And then we can see here, this is the thing that he was talking about. He said, this will be the procedure of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and place them for himself in his chariots and among his horsemen, and they will run before his chariots. He will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and 50s, and some to do his plowing and to reap his harvest, to make his weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will also take your daughters for perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and your vineyards and your olive groves and give them to his servants. He will take a tenth of your seed and of your vineyards and give to his officers and to his servants. He will also take your male servants and your female servants and your best young men and your donkeys and use them for his work. He will take a tenth of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his servants. So, you know, this is all opposite of what we said in Deuteronomy when Moses said he's not supposed to have many women, not supposed to have a lot of gold and silver. It's because they're basically rejecting Yah for a man-made king, right? And Yah didn't want one to be over, his fellow countrymen, that they were all supposed to be the same. But now, because of their misalignment and their own deciding to do their own thing, they're now being punished by wanting this. So in verse 18 it says, then you will cry out in that day because of your king whom you have chosen for yourself, but Yahuwah will not answer you in that day. Nevertheless, the people refused to listen to the voice of Samuel, and they said, no, but there shall be a king over us, that we also may be like all the nations, that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles, right? So Yah has been preserving them all throughout the, Red Sea parting over, Pharaoh and the men drowning. They're going in other nations, taking over, right? Like protecting, all the stuff that Yah has protected them from all the way to this point, and they still looking for a man to lead them, to follow behind them, and to fight for them, right? When Yah already had each nation, the 12 tribes, already, even when they were coming into the land, right? Like, what was it, Reuben and the half tribe of Manasseh said, hey, we want our land over here. Like, they're doing their own thing. And I think we do that a lot, right, as a people, even in the awakening, even in, Christian church, whatever else people like to talk about. We all the same. We all the stiff-necked, hard-headed people, I find, at least as my walk in awakening, seeing people, they're going to choose their own path, choose what they want to. And soon something bad start happening, right? They'll be like, oh, he didn't help me. He didn't, like, you didn't listen to do. You didn't do what he told you to do. But verse 21, now after Samuel heard all the words of the people, he repeated them in Yahuwah's hearing. And Yahuwah said to Samuel, listen to their voice and appoint them a king. So Samuel said to the men of Israel, go every man to his city. So this is when we know that King Saul was selected. All right. So next. So in the future, it's the same thing. So Ezekiel, I talk about this a lot. Ezekiel 20, right? It says in verse 3, as I live, declares Yahuwah, surely with a mighty hand and with a outstretched arm and with wrath poured out, I shall be king over you. I will bring you out from the peoples and gather you from the lands where you are scattered with a mighty hand, with an outstretched arm, and with wrath poured out. And I will bring you into the wilderness of the peoples, and there I will enter judgment with you face to face. As I enter into judgment with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Egypt, so I will enter into judgment with you, declares Yah. So he's saying that he wants to be king. And this is a future prophecy for us, that he still wants to be king over us, right? But yet he says this time, that's why I feel like there's going to be some persecution happening. But he says with a mighty hand, with an outstretched arm and wrath poured out, that he's going to pull us from, just like he did from the Egyptians, but it's going to be a greater pulling out from the four corners, that he's going to bring us to judgment in the wilderness, just like he did the first time. So, he's going to look at our hearts, right? So that's what I was saying, that he wants a circumcised heart. And if your heart is circumcised, then you will do all the other stuff. I think in a lot of Christian doctrine, they try to say that, you don't need the law, that the Ruach HaKoel, the Holy Spirit, will teach you all things. But yet, they have no guideline, and everybody's heart is different, right? Like something, he's telling us what he wants already through his laws, his commandments, right? He's already established that. That's why Yahushua was the atonement lamb that died for our sins, right? I'm part of the law, right? All that connects back to how does he fulfill some of the things of the law if there is no law, right? So it's still the same thing. That's what Hebrews is all about. When you start reading through the book of Hebrews, he's talking about to the Hebrews how Yahushua is connected through the law, right? How he's fulfilling a lot of those things, but yet we still know there's the coming things. He's going to return. So we know that everything has not been fulfilled. Just like 1 Corinthians 15 talks about, until all things are put under his footstool, the last will be death, right? So we know we're still dying. So all things has been made his footstool. We know that that's part of his return, right? So we definitely know that there's still more things to come. We can't just keep on looking back only at the cross, but as I say, we got to look forward as his return as well, so we won't miss him. So Yah wants to be king over us, and we can see also, next slide, that in Revelations, right, we see in Revelation 17, it says they will wage war against the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them because he is master of masters and king of kings, right? So we can see how he wants to be established once again as the king of all his people over the earth. Well, he can just basically wipe out the earth and start it back over again, but he wants our hearts, right? The kings over hearts. And that's why we are Mamleket Kohanim, a kingdom of priests. We're part of his priestly kingdom that he wants us to serve him. But it says, and those who are with him are the called and chosen and faithful. So this process, as we even see as we go through these times of the kings, we will see that there's always a remnant that's basically being preserved, even though the kings are going left and right and all over the place. That Yah still has a remnant that he's preserving throughout all that. And it says, he said to me, the waters which you saw, which where the harlot sits, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues, and the 10 horns which you saw, and the beast, these will hate the harlot and make her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh and burn her up with fire. So we can see that he's trying to establish, and there's going to be some, he's basically telling us about prophecy, even from the Tanakh all the way to the Brit Hadashah, from Genesis all the way to Revelation, right? Like he has a plan. And we can see the same thing in Revelation 19 when he talks about verse 11, I saw heaven open, behold a white horse, and he sat on it, faithful and true, and righteous he judges and wages war. His eyes are a flame of fire, and his head are many diadems, and he has his name written on him, which no one knows except himself. And he is clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of Yah. So we know that Yahushua is definitely the Word of Yah. And the armies which were in heaven, clothed in fine linen and clean, and following him on white horses. For his mouth comes a sharp sword. And that's also prophecy in Isaiah, talks about how he will have a rod from his mouth. But it says, so that with it he may strike down the nations, he will rule them with a rod of iron. He treads the winepress of fierce wrath of Yah, the Almighty, and on his robe and on his thigh the robe on his robe below his thigh has a name written, King of Kings and Masters of Masters. So we know in the end he's going to be king, whether we like it or not, right? But he's giving us time to basically trying to work it out, and we've asked for the king, and now we can see that the king basically was the point of our fall, right? So we know that Rehoboam, Solomon first was the big point, right? That split the kingdom. And then last week, we talked about Jeroboam, how he decided to follow the golden calves and is going to lead all that left side. Those are the northern kings, is going to leave all of them astray, right? And then even on the right side, the kings of Judah that came through Rehoboam, we're going to see how they continue to mix and follow some of the other nations that they weren't supposed to. They mixed with many of the other nations. And even, the same fall of the Canaanites. Remember, he told them the Canaanites to be cleared out the land. And we know that just like Jeroboam, he followed Baal. Baal is connected to the Canaanite gods, right? So he basically took those same golden calves of the Egyptians, of other nations, and he tried to mimic it times two, took two of golden calves. And then you can see that same blood, that same thought through Jezebel, and she's a Sidonian, and some of the other nations of people. They're all mixing in that same thought that Yah tried to preserve them from doing, right? That if they cleared out the land like he told them of the Amorites, the Canaanites, then they wouldn't have to deal with all this. But just because that continual disobedience, we can see that this continues to happen over and over and over to our people. All right. And it's important to understand as well. So like today, we're going to be going mostly through the left side. I'm going to try to at least establish an understanding because it gets confusing. It really does. You can even see on the chart there, as you get towards that big line where you see Jezebel's name, under there you see Jehoram, right? Jehoram. Then on the right side, the king of Judah, what's that say? Jehoram. So a lot of times they got the same names and stuff, so you can get confused as you go through a lot of this. You can see on the left side, if you go down from Jehoram to Jehu to Jehoahaz, right? And then on the right side, if you go all the way down to the bottom, where that last arrow is pointing in the middle, what's that say? Jehoahaz, right? Same name. So, these are just popular names people being used. And we know that even the southern tribe got sent away through Babylon. And when they came back, they have other kings, right? So that goes back to what Moses was saying, don't have other kings over you, right? And I gave y'all some time. I don't think I see anybody who responded. But one of the kings that was not of the bloodline of Israel that was over the Israelites was King Herod, right? He was an Edomite. So we can see what he did. He ravished the people, tried to kill all the bloodline of Yah's people to a point where he tried to kill the Messiah, right? The King of Kings, right? So we can see how all that's basically what he warned us from the very beginning, and how it's so devastating even to us now. All right, so let's go through on the left side. We'll go through some of these kings, and then we'll call it quits for the day. I'm not going to go through all of them. I want to get to a certain point because I want to, kind of go through them first. And then when we get to the right side, hopefully next week, then we can start, talking about the story of how they all intermingled and mixed in together. All right, so it's important to also notice, I'll just go ahead and name this right here. You can see how it has Rehoboam, and then we talked about last week how Rehoboam and his wife was Maacah was the descendant of Absalom. And Absalom had a Canaanite grandfather. His mom was a Canaanite, right? And that passed down to, Rehoboam and to Abijah. And then there was Asa. We'll talk about that little next week. But you see where Asa is on the left side from Jeroboam all the way down to King Ahab. All those people were, maybe it's Nadab, but all those people were during the time of Asa. All those northern kingdom kings kept on getting killed and changing leadership because of all the sin of Jeroboam is going through them, right? It's really bothering them. It's messing them up. And you can see that in some of the history there and how they end up marrying back with Jezebel and the Canaanites again. Sidonians are descendants of the Canaanites. All right, just want to say that. So next. All right, so also to show people my DNA once again, the Bronze Age, Yehuda, Southern Levant. I say Levant is the Middle East. So you can go on My True Ancestry and get some of this. They'll nickel and dime you a lot. But you can see that some of their modernized DNA is the Yemenite Jews, which you saw on my chart, right? The Yemenite as well, from Yemen. Some of the people that connect back to us. And even the Limba, right, say they come from Yemen. So you can see how there's a lot of those connections. And then you see Mexican, this is the DNA for these people. But, you saw my DNA, the Mexican, the Egyptian, the Miwok. Miwoks are Californian Native Americans. What they got to do with North Carolina people, right? Saudi, Bedouin, and Palestinian. So these are supposed to be the connection to the DNA they brought out of the ground in Israel, in the southern nation. And, when you click on the first picture, they have this, white Egyptian king, right, looking guy. Because, if you know about the Greek kingdom, how they came and took over a lot of them. We'll talk about that for the all that's in the Bible study, during the king of the north, the king of the south, and a lot of that stuff that was going on. They try to make the image of, those areas to be based upon that one time in history. That's where you hear they say that Egyptians weren't black and stuff like that. But you can see below that. So they show that picture first. And then below that, you can see the Canaanite Semite. I think that's what that says from here. And you can see that that's basically the Israelites. The Israelites were, especially Judah. He married, a Canaanite woman to start with. And then his daughter-in-law, Tamar, right, tricked him. And she was from the land because he sent her home in the land of Canaan to be with her father. And you can see, even with that she's, once again, got two Canaanite women he had children by. So the Israelites, especially Judah, you got to have some Canaanite, Hamite blood in you to be a descendant of Judah, right? So the Jewish people say they Jews because of being descendant from Judah. But now they have changed it from a more ancient, just like they changed the way of Semitic. How they say anti-Semitic, but, Semitic means anybody who came from Shem. So that could be Ishmaelites, Muslims, Arabs, but they don't use that towards them. They say the modern day understanding, is just based upon certain people groups, right? So, and the same thing when they did Jews and Hebrews and stuff like that, they try to say anybody who speaks the Hebrew language. And we just saw that Hebrew is a Afro-Asiatic language. Right? So they don't take the heritage of it. They should say the modern day understanding. So they changed it. So that's why it's so important, because even here it says archaeology and linguist evidence show the kingdom of Israel and kingdom of Judah represents a subset of Canaanite culture and the Bronze Age. Cities like Jerusalem were large and important walled cities, right? It says in red, during the Iron Age, southern Canaan was dominated by the king of Israel and Judah, as well as the Philistine city-states on the Mediterranean coast. So we know that my DNA connects to that. Your DNA probably, some people probably collect even closer because I got so many mixtures in my DNA. But some of the people who straight off the slave trade probably have DNA that's closer. We find in people, in not this site, but some of the other archaeology sites that we are working with, they have a 0% relationship. That means you are straight from that place. You know, the lower the number when you're talking about relationship, the closer you are to it. And they have a 0% to some of the places in Africa where some of, you know, they're trying to talk about some of the connections to the Limba people. But it's just amazing because they're from Tennessee. They're from, you know, Chicago and places. And I'm like, wow, how do you have a 0%? So this is the reason why it's so important for us to do this, because you might have a different makeup and different connections. There's so many different migrations. But, you know, the more people to do it, the better. So next. So talking about the king, the first one was Nadab and Baasha, right? So you can see that section when I was talking about and highlighting earlier. So these are those kings that actually came through there. And I know this is going to be, you know, it's just some history to kind of go through, but it's important to understand the differences because these are the northern kingdoms that's going to be taken away into captivity. And if you're trying to find like what tribe and royalty and all that stuff, you gotta have to understand how some of these nations came about and how even not just Ephraim ruled in the northern tribe, but some of the other tribes as well. So it said that, you know, Jeroboam was a terrible king, right? And we can see in 1 Kings 15, it says, now Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, became king over Israel in the 2nd year of Asa, king of Judah. So that's why I was telling you about King Asa, right? King Asa is that one that all these kings going to be dying through while he's still the king in the southern in Judea. It says, and he reigned over Israel 2 years. He did evil in the sight of Yahuwah and walked in the way of his father, in which he made Israel sin. So the same Jeroboam sin is now going from generation to generation, messing up the people. So that's why Yah said, don't have this king over you, right? It's a man. But because they chose this, they're going to be eventually crying out to him, trying to ask for his help. And he said he won't be there. But it says, verse 27, then Baasha, the son of Ahijah, the house of Issachar, conspired against him, and Baasha struck him down at Gibeathon, which belonged to the Philistines, while Nadab and all the Israel were laying siege to Gibeathon. So Baasha killed him in the 3rd year of Asa, the king of Judah, and reigned in his place. So we can see that the son of Jeroboam, because there was a prophecy that the descendants of Jeroboam would not rule on the throne. So we can see that, you know, Nadab, he was there, and that was the end of Jeroboam, right? Rulership. So, and now Issachar, somebody from the tribe of Issachar, is now taking control over the northern kingdom, right? And he killed all the household of Jeroboam. So the prophecy was basically fulfilled. So Yah is not playing around with people, right? Like, I don't see why people think that this is all a game and it's just fun. Like, Yah he's loving, but he don't play around either. I don't see why people think, you know, you can still do stuff before him and claim to, you know, now, especially to me, that's the scariest point of finding out we were Israelites. It wasn't like, oh, we the Israelites. I was like humbled. I'm like, we Israelites, we're the Jew, not the Gentile. Like, the Gentiles were supposed to be able to do other stuff and be free and, you know, eat pork and whatever people want to say, even though I don't think that's fully true. But, you know, they were the ones that were getting a little bit more free range, right? It was easy to be a Gentile and still be accepted. But if you're an Israelite, it says blessings and the punishments, right? That judgment will start with the house of Israel, right? Like, starts with us. So it's like he's going to basically fine tune us, right? As part of what he talks about the wilderness, right? And he says, you know, he's going to pull us. He's going to be king over us, whether we like it or not. And that's what's happening now, I feel like, in the world when we hear all this stuff that's happening around us in politics and how they're basically targeting the 14th Amendment for African Americans. If you don't know about that, please Google it. But we're going to celebrate Juneteenth, and nobody even knows about the 13th Amendment and the Emancipation Proclamation and what that was all about. Not the same. So we got to understand what all this is around, because, you know, my issue was talking about how they found where some Europeans, right, Euro-Americans, were basically going in and taking civil rights classes in order to find ways to stop black people from getting rights. Like, there's some strategic thought to this. What was it, the 2025? Project 2025 bill. That's how they went to go study black people in order to find laws to restrict them from, they were taking like black people classes in order to stop them out of racism. And I'm like, wow, you know, but thankfully, hopefully, like, you know, the abolitionists, right? A lot of them were white people, right? So it was like white people tried to help us get out of slavery, and we were just sitting around in the middle of the fight, right? And I think that's what's going to happen again. You can see that, you know, MAGA and people, they're now dividing, and now people are talking about, you know, reparations and who we are as a people. And it says that, you know, Yah, he says, bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. So it's Yah's going to be doing it, not us. The point of what we should be doing is trying to get in line with Yah, and that's what these kings did not do. Right, and that's the reason why their descendants, the next generation, was still being lost, and that's why our generation is still being lost, because we're not getting the right lining with Yah. We're still allowing, you know, paganism and other influences to pull us away from what Yah wants to do through us as His people. You know, if we want to be the people, we got to be the people. There's no halfway, you know, no lukewarm when it comes to that. But we can see he killed all the household of Jeroboam. And he says that he did not leave to Jeroboam any person alive, until he had destroyed them, according to the word of Yahuwah, which he spoke by his servant Ahijah the Shilonite. So it's interesting when you start hearing some of these other prophets, and you don't really hear a lot of discussion around them, but you can see them throughout the Bible. Just because they didn't have a book accredited to them, I think it's also important to give them some highlight, because some of them actually had a book and it was lost. You can see it as you read through, I think, of Edodo or something, one of the prophets. It said, isn't it written in his book? And I'm like, who is this prophet? But it says, because of the sins of Jeroboam, which he sinned. So we can see that generation of sin going from the father to the son. And the same thing was going on in our families as well, if we allow it. But, you know, even like I said, some of the times we're doing what's right, and that one person decides to mess up, and it messes your children, when your child, or, you know, even us, if our parents were doing right, we decide to go astray, you can see the effects on those families from generations that happened after that. So same thing with Jeroboam. When he went astray, it really affected that whole northern kingdom lineage, because they were still picking on the sins that he did against Yah, by introducing that paganism and appointing his own priests. And it says, which he sinned, in which he made Israel sin, because of the provocation with which he provoked Yahuwah, El of Israel, to anger. And then in verse 32, then there was a war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel. So now the two northern and southern kingdom are fighting. Right? So we can see how, you know, people say black on black crime. You can see that's going on in the kingdom of Israel. Right? Like the southern and northern tribe are fighting one another. If you say they're all Israelites, that's what's happening. And we're still fighting among each other now. Right? So that goes back to the prophecy I showed yesterday. I think I showed about the other prophecy saying that they won't be jealous over one. Maybe that's Ezekiel 37. So that's the same about the dry bones rising up. And then also in Isaiah 11, right, it talks about once again that they will come together. The northern and southern tribe will come together, and they will be taken to the land and swoop down on the Philistines, right? So it just shows you that there's still some reconciliation from this point on, all the way to now, even, that there's some reconciliation that needs to be happening between our people throughout the four corners. And it says, in the third year of Asa, king of Judah, Baasha, the son of Ahijah, became king over all Israel at Tirzah, and reigned 24 years. He did evil in the sight of Yah, and walked in the way of Jeroboam, right? He's going to talk about the connection to Jeroboam, and in his sin, which he had made Israel. So we can see, you know, how the effects is actually happening now to Baasha, And Baasha's not even a descendant of Jeroboam, right? But he's affected what happened even in their community. All right, so next. So this is the next king. So, right, same that same group of people. It says in 1 Kings 16:6, and Baasha slept with his fathers and was buried in Tirzah, and Elah, his son, became king. So we see his son is now king. Moreover, the word of Yahuwah through the prophet Jehu, the son of Hanani, also came against Baasha and his household, both because of all the evil which he did in the sight of Yah, provoking him to anger with the works of his hand, and being like the house of Jeroboam. So they still doing the same evil stuff. Even though Yah used him to kill the one family for the sin, now that his family gets set up because they still caught up in the same sin. So it shows you that generational pattern, right? From one nation, one descendants to the next, and why we got to break that even within us. Because this is some of our ancestors, right? So we can see it's still going on even with us now. So it says in verse 8, in the 26th year of Asa, king of Judah, Elah, the son of Baasha, became king over Israel at Tirzah and reigned 2 years. He just reigned 2 years. Why did he reign only 2 years? Verse 9, his servant Zimri, commander of half his chariots, conspired against him. Now he was at Tirzah, drinking himself drunk in the house of Arza. He's not supposed to be drunk, right? That's against Torah. Who was over the household of Tirzah. Then Zimri went in and struck him and put him to death. So his own right-hand man put him to death, right? So it's like even our community, we can't trust one another, right? Like, how can, you try to find somebody to come and help you with your car or your house and stuff. And what do we always say, right? Like, we know that our own people don't do us right? Try to sometimes take advantage of us. So that's what Yah says in Torah, that we must love each other. So that's really, he said, love him with all his heart, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, right? Like we should, that's why we so messed up, because we don't show love to one another. We try to take advantage of one another, and that's part of that curse, right? Deuteronomy 28, when we're going to come into that. But it says, verse 10, then Zimri went in and struck him and put him to death in the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah. Same king, Asa, still king of Judah, right? Now we've been through 3 kings now? Get ready to be a 4th? And it's still Asa, still ruling from the Judea. He did not leave, and became king in his place. Verse 11, it came about when he became king, as soon as he sat on the throne, that he killed all the household of Baasha. So same thing happened to all his children, because he wasn't obedient and led them in the wrong direction. He did not leave a single male, neither of his relatives nor of his friends. Thus Zimri destroyed all the household of Baasha, according to the word of Yahuwah, which he spoke against Baasha through Jehu the prophet. For all the sins of Baasha and the sins of Elah, his son, which they sinned, and which they made Israel sin, provoking Yahuwah to Israel to anger with their idols, idol worship. So, we can't have Yah's favor still working in paganism and idolatry. And there's a lot of people now know, in Christian church, that those Christmas and all that's pagan. Why do we still hold on to that when that has nothing to do with our culture and our people, right? Like, Israelite culture comes from Israel. All that stuff got introduced when they went to, when somehow the key people who killed Messiah, right? Pontius Pilate was a Roman. And how does it change from somebody who was a pagan Roman who didn't even care about the Israelites' affairs, who killed them, he didn't want to kill the Messiah, but he ended up killing them. And then they're pagans. How do they now, the Roman Catholic Church basically rules Christianity? Like, what happened throughout all those years that it changed from an Israelite leadership to a Roman leadership and mixed in with European paganism, right? And it's the same thing for Africa. Right, we got voodoo and stuff like that, right? It makes sense that our people are doing voodoo and a lot of things mixed in with the Bible, libations mixed in with, all the lots casting and all that stuff. All that stuff about, the libations, that's part of what the priests were doing, right, in the Bible. But we can see that during the time of Jeroboam, he started instituting bad priests and start serving idolatry, idol gods. So those people that actually migrated from the 10 tribes into West Africa, they were already compromised in Israel. It wasn't when they, people act like as they travel through West Africa, they start, doing all this voodoo and stuff. No, they were already compromised. Even in Israel as a northern tribe, they were already compromised, right? Doing some of this pagan worship and stuff like that. So it makes sense that they would be in West Africa doing this stuff still to the day, right? Because now they're even more compromised as they migrated over by other nations. So next slide. So we can see King Zimri, right, and Omri. But it says in the 27th year of who? Asa, king of Judah, Zimri reigned for 7 days. Now we got 7 days. Had 2 years to 7 days in Tirzah. Now the people were camped against Gibbethon, which belonged to the Philistines, and the people who were camped heard it being said, Zimri has conspired and has also struck and killed the king. Therefore all Israel made Omri the commander of the army, king of Israel, that day in the camp. Then Omri and all Israel went with him up from Gibbethon and besieged Tirzah. When Zimri saw that his city was taken, he went into the citadel over the king's house and burned the king's house over himself with fire and died. He just gave up. Because of his sins, which he committed doing evil in the sight of Yahuwah, walking in the way of Jeroboam, and his sin, which he committed, misleading Israel into sin. So he only had 7 days. He must have done some bad stuff in 7 days to be killed and allowed, because other people were taking over the throne. But for some reason, he must have did some bad stuff to a point where he burned himself. He just went in the house and gave up. So he must have knew that it was over for him at that point. And even though he portrayed the leader, he wasn't really what the people favored. They actually put another person in his place. So, once again, happens to our people all the time here. We end up tap dancing for people and trying to get up that ladder. And then once we get up there, we end up shunning our own people. And then when something happens to us, right, after we find out, they really was just using you, and you get thrown away, right? And then you want to come back. We connected now. Please take me back. I'm black. I think, what was the other thing? The movie about the colored lady that married was Queen. Yeah, I niggers now. I niggers. Like she wanted to come back there, right, when she got rejected. So it's the same thing in our people, right? When we get rejected, we want to come in. We're just loving people. And it's amazing how we still forgive people and still bring them in. Tiger Woods saying, I'm not black, right? I'm Asian, even though his father's black, right? He took on, but then when he gets on his stuff, we the ones buying his, games and shoes or whatever else. We were supporting them. So it just shows you how we as a people are loving people, but how we also portray one another. And it's important, right? Because now it's talking about King Omri. So next slide. This is actually archaeology. So once again, that I don't understand why people can't believe the Bible when this is archaeology of stuff that they found, right? So this is the Moabite stele of King Mesha. And it says, I am Mesha, king of Moab. My father was king over Moab. For 30 years, I was king after my father. Omri was the king of Israel, and he oppressed Moab many days, and his son succeeded him. And he said, he too, I will oppress Moab. In my days, I looked down on him, and on his house of Israel has gone to ruin. And Omri has taken possession of the whole land of Medeba. And he lived there in the days and half the days of his son's 40 years. I took the vessel of Yahuwah, right? So he basically talked about how, he basically was there with these kings, right? That was living. And there's an artifact that actually connects back to it, right? As well. So you can see even with the Teldan stele, the one at the bottom, it says Israel is ruined. Hazael kills Joham. Jehu kills Ahaziah. Shalmaneser the third sieges Hazael, then receives tribute from Jehu. So we'll get to some of that later. I took the vessel of Yahuwah. So we can see that these names are basically putting in archaeology. Like, how do you not believe that the Bible is true and all this stuff? So this has to lead to something. So if these events were true, right, all those things that was prophesied about the king and how they would die is true, and even the prophecies that we talked about at the beginning, talking about Ezekiel 20 and the future prophecies, all of those things are still true because those things haven't occurred. So archaeology basically also confirms prophecies, because these are the prophecies that was happening in the past. And like I said, we got to be looking forward toward the future in the future prophecies, or we're going to be caught short with them too. All right, so next, so this is King Omri and Ahab. So this is where we're going to start getting to a close here. But we're basically getting out that little yellow circle. So all this is in that little yellow circle, right? So 1 Kings 2:21. I missed the chapter there. That's not the chapter. That's just the verses. I must have missed the chapter. But it says, then the people of Israel were divided into two parts. Half the people followed Tibni, the son of Ginath, to make him king, and the other half followed Omri. So there was a division there, right? So when he's becoming king, there was when Zimri was killed, there's now a division between the different people, right? So certain people picked Omri to be king, and now you have this other person, Tibni, right? Today, some people want him to be king. Verse 22, but the people who followed Omri prevailed over the people who followed Tibni, the son of Ginath, and Tibni died, and Omri became king. In the 31st year of Asa, same Judah kings over all this time, and Omri became king over Israel and reigned 12 years. He reigned 6 years at Tisra. So we see that Tirzah is important. He brought the hill of Samaria from Shemer for 2 talents of silver. He built on the hill and named the city which he built Samaria. So now we start talking about Samaria in the northern kingdom. And after the name of Shemer, the owner of the hill, Omri did evil in the sight of Yahuwah and acted more wickedly than those were before him. They were already acting terrible, and now you got somebody who's even worse. So Omri was even worse than them, right? For he walked in the way of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and his sins which he made Israel sin, provoking Yahuwah, Yah of Israel, with their idols. So idol worshiping, right? So Omri slept with his father, and he was buried in Samaria, and Ahab, his son, became king. So Ahab was even worse, right? That's the one that we'll talk about in a little bit. So next slide. So this is just some of the, once again, how prophecy lasts also. So in the book of Joshua, this is going back, it says, then Joshua made them take an oath that time, saying, cursed before Yahuwah is the man who rises up and builds the city Jericho. So anybody who, after he defeated it, he said, anybody who tries to rebuild it, they will be cursed. He said, with the loss of the firstborn, he shall lay its foundation, and with the loss of his youngest son, he shall set up his gates. So Yahuwah was with Yahusha, and his fame was in the land. So this is when Joshua was being established. He defeated Jericho. Now he put a curse on the land. So in 1 Kings 16, going back to the king time, right? Joshua was way back when they were trying to make it to the promised land. And now this is after they've been established, and now, to start getting kings and everything. So in 1 Kings 16, it says, it came about as though it had been a trivial thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. And he married Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, so Baal in his name, king of the Sidonians. So we know they can't have two kings, so this had to be a Canaanite king that was living in the land that didn't get ran out. Going back to what we talked about with Joshua, when he told him to run him out and he didn't, and the angel of Yah pulled out, right, and said, hey, you're just gonna get it now. I'm not gonna walk before you anymore. And he married, and went to serve Baal and worship him. He said it was a trivial thing. Wasn't a big deal for him to do this now. And you can see now how people are now having that mindset. It's okay to sin. It's okay to do idolatry, right? Because now they've been in it for so long. We've been in it for so long, right? That a lot of us, it's so hard for us to pull out of. It's not, people say it's not a big deal. I can worship Yah, or they say God, I believe in Jesus, right? And I can still do idolatry on the side. Like, no, that is not, but we're so used to it now that even during the transatlantic slave trade, we didn't do none of that stuff, right? And now we adopted other practices that's not even ours, right? That, That was bad even for the people who were doing them. It's bad for Europeans to do them, right? To be caught up in paganism and then mix it in with the Bible. And now we're taking on their customs and their traditions who actually enslaved us in order to do the same instead of breaking out and doing what Yah has called us to do, right? And that's, what Yah is calling now. Even, Ruth, she was part of the Moabites, right? The people that was cursed and said never can be connected to Israel for 10 generations or more, right? That she even said she's going to reject her past, her families, her connections. Told Naomi, your Elohim is El was my El, right? Like, your God is my God. Like, she basically now identified with the Yah of Israel, which she was blessed, even as a Gentile, heathen, or whatever you want to call people outside of Israel. So in the same way, we're trying to hold on to these things and still try to grab onto Yah, and it's not going to work. And that's what Ahab, Ahab still, he believed in Yah, but he wanted to mix in all this pagan worship all the way from Jeroboam all the way up to his time, and it was hurting the people from generation to generation. It's getting worse as it goes along. And then it says, verse 32, so he erected an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he built in Samaria. And Ahab also made the Asherah. Thus Ahab did more to provoke Yahuwah, El of Israel, than all the kings of Israel who were before him. Even Jeroboam. He's worse than Jeroboam because he's building upon the evilness, right? And that's how evil actually works. And even righteousness actually works, right? If your children actually listens to them, hopefully we're giving them a platform. Now, we're waking up. We don't know Hebrew, right? We lost a lot of our customs. We're trying to adopt. Hopefully, now that they're being raised in it, that they will do better than what we can do now. But in the same way, if we're not actually doing it and we're still connected to, paganism and not actually thinking that the things of Yah are important, they're going to take on that same attitude as well. It's not that important, right? So going back to the curse, in verse 34, it says, in his day, Hiel, the Bethelite, built Jericho. So this man, Hiel, he ended up building Jericho based upon, remember the curse in Joshua. He laid his foundation with the loss of Abram, his firstborn, and set up its gates with the loss of his youngest son, Segub, according to the word of Yahuwah, which he spoke by Joshua, the son of Nun. So all the way in Kings, it's talking about still with Joshua, had cursed the land, and it's still in effect to that day, right? Like, we talk about generational curses and stuff. It's important to get broken. That's why we need Yahusha, right? Like, something has to break the curse. We have to turn away from those things and, stop allowing it to hurt us from generation. That's why I'm against frat sororities, Masons, and all that, because, my family was connected to a lot of that. And, you start talking about how children are seeing things and black shadows and stuff, you wonder why all that stuff happens, right? Like, we open ourselves in portal, not for us, but also generations that come after us. And Masonry is really Egyptian worship, right? It goes back even to Kabbalah even, right? Jewish occult. So a lot of these things that Yah doesn't want us to do, we've been embracing them, and it's hurting our people, right? Frats and sororities, that's Greek. What's that have to do with, people that come from Israel or even Africa? What is Greek and why are we, that's not even our culture, unless you want to hold on to the 15% European, right, that basically enslaved, a lot of our family members, right, and raped our family members based on Deuteronomy 28. So next, we can see that Jezebel, right? Jezebel was definitely a black woman, right? We know that for sure because she was a Canaanite, and it's easy to prove because we can see Canaan's oldest son was Sidon, and the ancestors of the Sidonians. Canaan was also ancestors of the Hittites. Oh, that's something separate. But in 1 Kings 16:31, it says, as though it were not enough to follow the example of Jeroboam, he married Jezebel, the daughter of King Ethelbald of the Sidonians. So you can see that they're Canaanites and began to bow down to the worship of Baal, right? And we know that Jezebel was one that was killing prophets and trying to do stuff to Elijah and all that stuff, right? So we know that there was a lot going on because she was a princess of the Canaanite kingdom, of one of the Canaanite kingdoms. So she was a high elite. So, she was involved in, Baal worship, and a lot of it was what her father got Baal in his name. So, that's the reason why they were talking about don't marry the Canaanite women, because the women, they're strong women, right? They're going to raise your children and all. Even now, who do you marry, right? How is it going to affect your families? Right, the difference of beliefs and stuff. If you're not on the same accord, it could break up your marriage, right? We can see that a lot when you do marriage counseling. I can see a lot of times people are not on the same page, and it's usually because of where we are with Yah. You should allow Yah and Yahusha to be in the middle of all the things, because now you can see where you fall short, not just where your spouse falls short. Where do you fall short? Right? And that's marriage is a ministry. You should be trying to minister to the person that you love. You the one that chose them, right? Like, y'all didn't say, hey, we don't, at least here, we don't do a lot of arranged marriages and stuff. So you chose the person to be married with, and to, that's what I said, Yah hates divorce, right? Because you sealed it, and now you said that you're going to minister to that person, to, at least on the Christian vows, to for rich or poor. Don't be saying how he lazy and stuff if you picked them for definitely, or how she likes to spend a lot of money, and you the one that chose her, right? For sick or health, what is it? Sick, healthy or sick, whatever. Even in sickness, if your person gets sick, then are you going to be there to take care of them, right? All those things is commitments so even we got to be equally yoked when it's talking about raising your children. Are you going to confuse your children? Like today, you want to do the Christian stuff. Tomorrow, we're going to do the Muslim stuff. The next day, we're going to do the biblical stuff. We're going to do the Jewish stuff. It's like you got to be on the same page, and it's most important to be on the same page with Yah, right? So that's the important piece, to be on his page. So we see Jezebel. This is important when it comes to the kings, because she married King Ahab. And a lot of people miss this part. But next, you got Attila, right? Oh, you got a different slide than me. Go to the next one. Okay, Attila. So you have Attila here, and she's basically a descendant of Jezebel, right? And of Ahab. She's half Israelite, half Sidonian. And why does her name even come up in the Bible, right? Because she ends up marrying a king of Judah, right? So, and then when she marries, let me see, find out which king. Mother has
Hazia.
What do you see?
Southern tribe. She's the mother.
Mother of Ahazah. So the mother of Ahazah, who's Ahazah's father? Do I have it up there?
King Omri.
Well, King Omri's the northern. So let me see. Attila married Jeroboam. Jeroboam should be somewhere up there. Maybe I don't have it up there. But she ends up marrying Jehoram of the southern tribe, right, of Judah. And when she ends up marrying him, okay, yeah, there it is on the bottom. When she ends up marrying him, he ends up, of course, dying, and his son Ahazah ends up being king, and then he dies. And then she decides to kill all her grandchildren that could rule in Judah, and becomes queen. She missed one grandson, but she kills all her grandsons because Judah and Israel are still fighting. So she wants, basically the bloodline of the northern kingdom to rule the whole house of Israel like it was before, right? We talked about how the blessing was given to Ephraim at first before it moved to Judah, right, with King David. So you can see how she still wants that. She kills even her own grandchildren and starts to pull in things of Baal, even into the holy places of Yah, right? And her sons, I think it said something about her sons end up being priests or something. Oh yeah, verse 2 Chronicles 24:7. For the sons of the wicked Attila had broken into the house of Yah and even used the holy things of the house of Yahuwah for the Baals. So we can see that Baal worship continue, sun worship continue to be among our people, even into using Yah's holy things for for the worship of evil. So, people talking about how they say repurpose. I hear Christians saying that now. You can take something evil and repurpose for good. Like, I don't see how you take evil stuff. And that's one thing talking about a computer or, not talking about, something that's evil like voodoo and repurposing it for Yah. I don't see how you do that. Something from the secular sense and repurpose it for Yah. But we can see that people were taking the things of Yah and actually using it for evil things, which is even worse to me, right? So, and we know that Attila definitely was, it says in the last verse there, 2 Chronicles 21:6, he walked in the ways of the king of Israel just as the house of Ahab did, for Ahab's daughter was his wife. So it makes a comment of, sometimes people act like Attila was not, a direct descendant of Ahab and she wasn't an Israelite, but that definitely shows you that she was an Israelite, right? And he did evil in the sight of Yahuwah. So we know that Attila, she made a mess. She was that same Jeroboam spirit is now being passed down all the way, and now it's not only affecting the northern tribe, it's actually slipping over to the southern tribe. So I'll stop there just because I want to now go down the line of Judah to get you caught up to this point where they're crossing and, show you how that even the sins of Jeroboam even affected Judah, right? Even after this point. So the mixture of the kings, even with the Canaanites, where Yah had warned them from way back when not to integrate with the Canaanites, kill them out, and they still didn't do it, how now it's affecting them, and then how he told them not to ask for a king, and they still asked for a king, and now how this, wickedness is starting to impact them. Right now it's just internal fighting, but eventually they will lose the kingdom to other nations as well. It's just like Yah told them that they'll be crying out. So we'll get to that next week, Yah willing. All right. Shabbat Shalom, cousin. Bogans. Good to see y'all in here. All right. I don't see any questions, at least not on my screen. So we'll have prayer. Dear Yah, we just thank you for this day. Help us to live righteous life before you and help us to do what's your will. Help us to be committed fully unto you with our whole heart, to do the things that you called us to do, to save us even in the time of despair. We know that judgment has to come upon this world, and we know that your wrath shall soon to come. The day of wrath shall happen. But help us not to be part of that wrath, not to be caught up, to know that you're with us. And as your son, Yahushua, said, when we see these things happen, to be able to lift up our head, for our redemption draws nigh. So we ask you to just continue to not, to help us to not to walk in the footsteps of our ancestors, of the sins of Jeroboam and all the sins of even Judah, Manasseh, and all the things that's happening for generations, that we can now read and see what their mistakes were and take action to do what's right. But help soften our heart for us to do it. Help us not to have a callous heart. Help us not to be a reprobate in your sight. Help us to change our ways while there's still a chance, especially in a world that at least has half peace now. When we were stuck up in the house and couldn't do things, we saw that there was something that was, fearful, that we couldn't go out and do the things that you called us to do. And now we have the full capability and the warnings from the past, and help us not to still to do what's wrong, or to sit still and not try to be used by you in this time to reach our family members, those that we love, and most important, those that you love as well. So we ask you to help us to help our heart to be aligned with you. Help us to fulfill the purpose that you created each and every one of us for, to be a minister unto you and being a servant to your people, and be that kingdom of priests, the Mamleket Kohanim, a holy nation that you've called out. Help us not just to hear the word, but also apply it to our lives and be the people that you've called us to be as your children, as a sign into the nations and the world to repent of their sins while there's still a chance, to bring even, be a light even to the Gentiles, so they can even see the goodness and the change within us, that they will even repent those that you have even called. We love you and we praise you. Be with those that's going through problems and situations in their life. Help them to look to you and help whatever they're dealing with become a testimony for others to also find strength in you. And help us to trust in you even to our last breath. In Yahushua's name we do pray. Hallelujah. We thank you. We praise you. Amen. Hallelujah.